Premier League's profit and sustainability rules are sold to us as financial fair play, a way to keep clubs from going bust. But there are those who feel it's starting to look a lot like a system that protects the big boys and keeps the rest in their lane. Here's how it works and why people feel that way. So clubs can only lose 105 million quid over 3 years, which sounds fair, but here's the kicker. Your limit includes how much you earn. So if you're one of the traditional top 6, you've got massive global revenue streams and you can spend way more while still technically following the rules. Meanwhile, ambitious clubs who've got money like Newcastle, Villa or Forest, well, they're bringing a knife to a gunfight. Newcastle might be backed by Saudi billions, but they just can't splurge the cash. Their commercial income isn't there yet. Want to buy world-class talent? Well, PSR says to them, your owner might have the money, but you're not making enough in shirt sales in Asia for that. The Magpies won their first domestic trophy since 1955, qualified for the Champions League, which you'd think would be a great springboard for them to go on and start building a team to challenge at the top. But because of PSR restraints, they couldn't break their wage structure for a new Alexander Isak contract, and look what's happened there. Nottingham Forest tried to invest to survive, they did that, but they got punished anyway. Meanwhile, clubs like Spurs, until last season, hadn't won a trophy in over 18 years, but because they rake in cash from the new stadium, they get a much bigger PSR allowance than a newly promoted club who are just trying to stay up. And let's not forget the loopholes these big boys are exploiting. Chelsea found the trick with those long contracts, selling the women's team. City are masters of related party sponsorships. Etihad this, Etisalat that, all within the rules, and fair play to them for capitalising on those opportunities. But what about the smaller clubs? They don't have that luxury. Now look, financial sustainability matters. Nobody wants another Bury or Morecambe situation. But there's increasing concern that rather than levelling the playing field, the current rules cement the existing hierarchy. So what's the solution? We'll either loosen the reins so ambitious clubs can spend within their means, or cap spending based on something other than revenue. Otherwise, we're just watching the same 6 teams swapping silverware most seasons while the rest play musical chairs for 7th. And that, folks, ain't what the Premier League was built on.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. And I suppose I should say, first and foremost, a happy new year to each and every one of you, our wonderful listeners here on Trans Europe Express. I'm Danny Kelly. With me on the Express for the next 3 hours is I'd like, pretend that he was a junior member of the crew, the fireman Wally to Casey Jones. There's one for the teenagers. But of course, without him, there will be no show. The great Andy Brassell will be with us for the next 3 hours. 3 hours that will see us cover all the big stories from Europe. I mean, there are amazing stories going around at the moment, even though not every league is actually in action. We'll hear about those leagues who have had games. We'll definitely start with Liam Rosenior, moving from Strasbourg to Chelsea. There's an upgrade in your career if you ever heard one. And what's going to happen to Strasbourg off the back of that? We'll talk, Mbappe watch. Lee Davey will join us. For the first time in nearly half a century, there is a Paris derby in French football. Lee, of course, who's an expert on Paris Saint-Germain, will tell us all about the other team who are literally 50 metres away, Paris FC. Tim Vickery will join us from South America. And Tony Afoke will bring us all the latest from the AFCON in Morocco. All of that, plus a poll for you and much else besides. Welcome one, welcome all to the first Trans-Europe Express of 2026, right here on talkSPORT. Yeah, so apologies in advance for any sniffling you hear. I've got, I feel fine, but I've got one of those wintry colds. I'm not doing much to shake it, apparently. Andy, good evening. How are you?
Happy New Year, Danny. I'm very good.
And you, my friend.
Although perhaps not quite as good as Liam Rosenior at the moment. He must be feeling on top of the world as he arrives in London.
Let us start there with Liam Rosenior, a decent, though not outstanding footballer in his time, son of a possibly even better footballer, but making his way in the coaching world over the past few years. went to Strasbourg, who are, of course, part of the sort of Chelsea empire, if you like. And now we understand, well, talkSPORT are reporting, he's in London, and the next thing you'll hear sometime very soon is he has been appointed manager of Chelsea. Let's not forget, not so long ago, champions of Europe and currently champions of the world. It's an incredible career upgrade for Liam.
It is on paper, but I think there's a lot of logic to it. Even if there will be some Chelsea fans that feel quite underwhelmed, and if there are some neutral observers who feel that perhaps Liam Rosenior is being a little bit over-promoted off the back of 18 months at
Who
Strasbourg.
knows? In the world of football, it's so mad now, Andy. We have no way of knowing that until he actually gets a go.
I agree, and I think it's to miss the point of what Chelsea are and what Liam Rosenior is at the moment. You know, we're not talking about comparing him with Mourinho or Ancelotti, or perhaps not even
Conte,
Maresca.
any of those gang, yeah.
Yeah, because this is a different Chelsea, a different project with different aims at the moment. It was clear if they're really serious, and despite the fact they've developed into a really good cup team, there's no doubt about that under Maresca, that at this moment, it always seemed to me, despite the thoughts of some going back a number of weeks, that Chelsea winning the Premier League this season, even as an outsider, felt really, really fanciful to me.
Wow.
It's just not where they are at the moment. This is not a Chelsea that's building around a Terry and a Drogba and a Cech and a Lampard and a Ballack. It's just not that.
Never mind Ashley Cole.
Completely.
What a team! What a team!
No, exactly. One of the greatest in Premier League or even English top flight history. And you know what? I don't think we can compare current Chelsea to that, because that's not the way that things have been run under Bowley and under Clearlake. Now, clearly, Strasbourg, and much to the chagrin of their supporters, are being run as a subordinate in the Blue Co operation, and for that reason, that has opened up this opportunity to Liam Rosenior. Interestingly, who was accompanied to the airport in Strasbourg today by the president, Mark Keller, and by the recently appointed sporting director, David Weir, who was at Brighton before, who, as I've said to you before on this programme, Daddy, I would not be stunned to see take up a position at Stamford Bridge sometime in the medium term as well. But what we've seen with Liam Rosenior, and notwithstanding the fact that the current run of form that he's on at Strasbourg, they've won twice in League since the beginning of October, which is a run that would get you sacked at Chelsea.
European form is fantastic.
It is. In a competition.
Andy, I'm sorry. I trampled over the point you're making there. If he was Chelsea manager and was in the kind of form he's at Strasbourg in the league, he'd have been sacked anyway.
Yeah, he would. And you know what? You're right. They have been better in the Europa Conference League, but they should be. You know, they're a very, very well-funded club. Now, that's the upside for those Strasbourg fans of the Blue Co connection. That
yes, of course.
They have had access to the sort of resources that French clubs outside PSG, and to a lesser extent Marseille, just don't have in 2025-26. And with that in mind, their current run of form is even less acceptable. But if we're talking about how Rosenior makes sense to this modern Chelsea, this current Chelsea, whatever this current Chelsea is, he's a brilliant developer of players. And if it's not just about the results, if it's about collateral, if it's about the Moneyball side of it, if it's about hoarding young players and making them into the best they can be, he's possibly one of the better coaches that you could actually appoint, even forgetting about the Blue Co connection, because you look at the players who've come a really, really long way again under him. So you're looking not just Emmanuel Omega, who of course will be joining him at Stamford Bridge later this year. You're looking at Diego Moreira, who was at Chelsea before and, you know, didn't really look a top flight player in his previous loan at Lyon, and he's become a really, really good wing back there. You look at Joaquin Panakei, who's the successor up front to Omega. Again, someone who you wouldn't rule out of a Chelsea move in future. I should probably leave this off the end of each sentence about these players.
Yeah, but no. We all know that it's some kind of escape tunnel to Stamford Bridge and to West London. We understand that, but there'll be others who go elsewhere. Andy, and in some ways, that we'll come back to what the shortcomings of that might be. But, of course, Chelsea fans who have noticed that they have the youngest team in the Premier League and continue to scoop up the best young players from around the world, it is a mirror image of what's happening at Strasbourg, where, however well or badly they've done, they have been fielding under Liam Rosenior the youngest team in France.
Yeah, that's right, Danny. If we go back to the first day of the season, and then we've said this on the show before, when they played Metz just down the road, they were the first team in any of the top 5 leagues to put out an 11 exclusively of players born in the 21st century. So,
incredible.
Very much like Chelsea, we know Rosenior's had some players that other clubs in France can't afford. We know he's had some quality players, but he has made them into the players they should be. And in some cases, like the case of Moreira, like I was saying, made them into more than perhaps people thought they could be as well. So I think it's not just about someone who's a great communicator, a great motivator, someone who has got a collective philosophy, but he's good at getting inside the heads of players and really improving individual players as well. Now, of course, all of his coaching in Strasbourg has been exclusively in English, really, not French, because they have that sort of multinational angle to them as well. And that is the case in a lot of dressing rooms across Europe nowadays. But really, comparing him to previous Chelsea coaches and saying this isn't the equal of a Mourinho or a Conte, as we were saying before, that is not where Chelsea are at now. And for where they're at, it's a really, really logical choice. Whether that means he's a great Chelsea coach or a good Chelsea coach for the next 3, 4, 5 years, of course, there's a huge question mark over that. But there's a lot of lateral sense to it.
Okay, let's say that's a given. And you're usually right, Andy. Not always, but usually right.
Two things. No one's right all the time, are they?
No, but no. I'm just checking. No, not even me. I'm putting a couple of counter arguments or possible scenarios. Of course, it could all go terribly well, and he could be leading Chelsea to unimaginable glory within weeks. Who knows? First of all, I guess it makes sense as well because Chelsea have had this record of having, the great big beasts, but they would have kicked up about the resources the way they're being. Chelsea they're spending plenty of money on transfers and wages, but they're not bringing in your Michael Ballacks of this world. Let's put it like that. And he is not likely, I think, because he's had such a career upgrade, to kick up too much about it. That's not to say he's a yes man, but I think you know what I mean.
No, I think there's a difference between being a yes man and understanding what the company is and respecting that. And he always did Strasbourg, for example. I mean, they've had issues this season, as we hinted at before, with sections of ultras being really unhappy about the fact that the club is essentially a subordinate of Chelsea. And, when Omega joined, of course, quite soon after he'd received the captaincy, which Strasbourg, which left a sour taste in some mouths, even if it was, to us, a really obvious transfer. We had basically these banners saying Omega is a pawn of Blueco. And Rosenior came out and really stood up for him. And, he stood up for the way that the club was run and, the way that it was funded, because, of course, he's really pleased to have a lot of players that other clubs in France couldn't afford. And that will be the same. But look, I think when we talk about how Chelsea are, it's not just about how Chelsea have changed. It's about how football has changed. And certainly how the way Premier League clubs do business has changed, in that you would rather pay money for potential than a prime age sure thing, and I think PSR has had a massive effect on that as well. So I don't know if appointing Rosenior is just a symptom of modern Chelsea. Maybe it's a symptom of modern English top level football as well. We'll find out over the next couple of years.
The other thing that will happen, of course, is that Maresca would have been thought of as an equally safe pair of hands, unlikely to get on his high horse. Until, of course, he won the World Club Championship. And then he thinks, it turns out I am an absolutely elite manager and I need to have more power over the club. There's that. But equally, Andy, and this is where I think the road hits the rubber with this project with Chelsea, I do a review of the Premier League's fixtures results on a Monday on HJ. Before you come on to up the quality of the broadcasting, and Chelsea fans, whatever you tell them about the project, and Andy Jacobs, of course, is leading among them. As soon as they lose 2 successive games, it's the house goes on fire. And so while the Chelsea owners may have a financial model that makes perfect sense to them, and don't forget they paid billions for the club, Chelsea fans still want to see them challenging for things. And that's really the tightrope that Liam will walk.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Danny. This is where the difference is in terms of how Liam Rosenior will operate. Because at Strasbourg, even though they're a club with history, a previous French title winner, well supported, brought back from the brink after they went into judicial liquidation by the love of their fans, they are not one of the monster names of European or even French football. So even though they're a club of substance, getting back to challenging, on the other hand, there's not the same pressure. And even when the form went awry in recent years, and Rosenior pinned it on the players, really. He said, look, if I have players who can't understand my tactical instructions or can't follow my tactical instructions, I'll just get some other players. And, he had the stature to do that at Strasbourg. The thing is, he was also able to experiment, and he was able to experiment in those Conference League games, a little bit like Enzo Maresca did, actually, in Chelsea's Conference League games last season. A bit of a unique experiment, really. But will he be able to do that at Chelsea? Because the pressure, it means reason is the first victim of that, doesn't it, really? You can't really say, oh, well, we're building towards something, because it's like, yeah, but it's Chelsea. You've got to win now.
Yeah, the positive, of course, is that, without being... The last thing anyone could accuse Trans Europe Express of being is parochial, but it is good to see a young English manager in the middle of old English managers saying no English manager is ever going to get a chance in the top 5 or 6 in England. Well, they are now. And we'll see how. So, obviously, we wish Chelsea had stubbed their toe at every possible opportunity. But he personally, I wish him nothing but the very, very best of luck in his new gig. Here's our poll for tonight, by the way, and it requires not knowledge but good guesswork. Enzo Maresca is the current manager of the world champions. Where will he manage next? And the 4 options we've given you are Manchester City, where, of course, he learnt his trade. Juventus, who are always looking for good Italian managers. The Saudi Pro League, what a thing it would be for them to say, look, here's the manager of the team that won the Club World Cup. Or Napoli, because Conte, despite how brilliantly they're doing at the moment, is always looking for a way out of every job. The poll is on X/Twitter. Where you can go and vote. Just put in at talkSPORT, at Danny Kelly Words, or at Andy Brassell, 2 S's and 2 L's, and you can vote in that poll. What we're going to come back in a few seconds' time. Obviously, Strasbourg is the story in France, but there are other stories as well, and we'll talk about Liga next here on Trans Europe Express. Yeah, I was just doing a bit of a calculation there, Andy. But his father, of course, Liam Rosenior's father, was a good footballer, Leroy. And they're starting to dominate London football now. Leroy played for Fulham, QPR, West Ham, Charlton. Now his son is managing, or going to be managing, Chelsea. So they're gradually knocking off the London clubs one after another. That's what I spend my time during the break doing, instead of doing research on serious matters that we have to cover in the rest of Trans Europe Express, where now we're turning Andy's attention, our attention, to the rest of football in France, who will be having to work out where Strasbourg go for their next manager, though it will be somebody Chelsea connected. I think we're knowledgeable enough to say that. But Andy, the big news in France is that we're into the new year and exactly halfway through the French season. And Lens are the autumn champions. They won 3-0 at Toulouse. And while this might not sound no big deal, I know there's still half a season to go, in the era of Paris Saint-Germain's having the money, this is actually a very unusual thing that Lens have done.
Yeah, so they're the fourth team to be autumn champions that aren't PSG since QSI have taken over PSG. Last one, in case you wondered, 2021, Rudy Garcia's Lyon. I mean, that seems like a really long time ago.
But he seems like 10 managers ago at Lyon, and it's only for 5 years.
Yeah, he does, and if you think he's like close to retirement now, it's extraordinary, really. Of course, they fell
away, didn't they?
That season, yeah, it fell away really badly in the last couple of games of the season. But it's a remarkable achievement, really, especially when we talk about the budget at Lens. You know, they don't have the money of a Strasbourg, for example. You know, they've just cut players left and right, made some big sales over the last couple of years. You know, we look at Kuzanov, Samba, Frankowski, so many others, and Fofana, and really what they've done in terms of the coach Pierre, who we seem to praise on a weekly basis because he deserves it, and their sporting director Jean-Louis Leca is a phenomenal effort, and as well they're starting to get a little bit of that swagger of champions. I mean, part of that might be to do with Florian Thauvin kind of leading the way, and he's a man who's always had a little bit of swagger to him. Of course, Newcastle fans will probably remember him and Chancellor Mbemba in the tuxes turning up to a home game. I still can't work out why that angered people so much. I mean, if they hadn't have had the bow tie actually tied, I understand it, because it would have looked as if they'd just rolled out of a casino. But you know, turning up looking smart, I don't really have an issue with that for footballers. But it was interesting, talking of that champion swag, Charlie Cresswell, of course, the English defender of Toulouse, who has been linked with a load of different Premier League moves over these last couple of weeks, and I'm sure he will continue to be while he's still at Toulouse. There was a little bit of chip between him and Adrien Thomasson, the midfielder of Lens. And once Thomasson scored the second goal, he made sure to seek out Charlie Cresswell so he could give a little bit back to him. And he said it afterwards as well. Players never say that. They always say, oh, it's no big deal. And he said, he gave me some in the first half. So the minute I scored, I thought, right, I'm going to go back and have a little word with him. And I did.
Andy, last week, of course, the show, we were interspersing it with reports from the darts. Congratulations to Luke Littler. I think I'll be saying that phrase well into my retirement from broadcasting, won't I? But we will be bringing you updates from the Ashes once the fifth test gets into its second day in Sydney, where hopefully the Yorkshire duo of Root and Brook will be seeing England to an even stronger position. That's my hope anyway. But there is live games on at the moment, Andy. I forgot to get the scores from you.
Yeah, so at the moment, we've got the Paris Derby that we'll be hearing more of later. PSG
amazing event.
They were leading 1-0 at half-time by Desiree Doué. And then we had a penalty equaliser by William Gerbils, the former striker from Lyon and Monaco, scoring his first goal in the Paris Derby. But PSG went straight up the other end, deflected shot from Ousmane Dembélé to put them 2-1 up. Just about 10 minutes left there. Slightly earlier stage in San Sebastian, where it's Real Sociedad 1, Atletico 1. Opener by Alex Sorloth right at the start of the second half, heading in a delivery from Giuliano Simeone. And then an equaliser from Gonzalo Guedes, set up by a brilliant cross by Take Kubo. Of course, how, I guess, Guedes Wolves fans must look at him and think, there is this guy smashing it in La Liga who used to play for us. Interestingly, before he did equalise, though, a sitter missed by Conor Gallagher. Elsewhere in Italy, Inter keeping in touch with the leaders. They're leading 2-0 against Bologna, goals by Zielinski and Lautaro.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll get you to give me those again in a few minutes' time, Andy, as some of them head towards the final whistle. Back in France, I think the most eye-catching result of the recent round of games, Marseille, ostensibly in the title race, 0. Nantes, who were bottom, I think, or equal bottom on points when the game kicked off, 2.
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. And look, Nantes have been serious going into this transfer window. They've said, look, we need to make big changes. Of course, they just changed their coach as well. So there's a sense that they are really flirting with disaster. They've been circling the drain for a while. But I don't think anyone really expected them to go to Marseille and win. And they were really good from the start. They had a goal controversially ruled out in the first 10 minutes. It was one of those VAR decisions that took 5 minutes because it was clearly inconclusive. And it was inconclusive enough that they'd rather not give the goal than give the goal, if you know what I mean. But I
don't anymore, Andy. I've given up on working out what they're thinking in VAR trucks, if I'm truthful.
But they took the lead from there, and Marseille got a red card. Arthur Vermeeren sent off for a really, really awful higher challenge on Anthony Lopez, the Nantes goalkeeper. Nantes got a second. And then from there, Remy Cabella from the penalty spot late on after Marseille had gone down to 9 men. Cabella, of course, used to play for Newcastle, a champion with Montpellier, one of those rare non-PSG champions in the QSI era, along with Olivier Giroud and Younes Belhanda back in 2012. And Cabella playing his first game after being one of those signings for them as well. So a brilliant result for Nantes. And what it's done, really, is condensed the space between third and the rest, because it looked like there was a gap between the top 4 and the rest in France. But some of those results this weekend, so Rennes going to Lille, who are in 4th place and winning 2-0. Marseille losing as well as helping out Nantes. It sort of pulls Marseille back towards the pack as well. And Lyon going and winning at Monaco. Of course, Endrick not qualified to make his debut yet. We're going to have to wait until next weekend for that. But Pavel Schultz scoring a couple of goals. And what that means, just to read you through the table, presuming that PSG hold on to this win, Lens, as we know, at the halfway point, 17 games in, top with 40 points, PSG 39, and now there's a 7-point gap between PSG and Marseille. So PSG 39, Marseille 32, Lille in 4th 32, Lyon, who've got Endrick to come in with 30 in 5th, Rennes 30 in 6th as well, and Strasbourg on 24 in 7th. If they'd have just got a couple of better results in recent weeks under Liam Rosenior, they'd be right in the mix as well.
Yeah, top 3 automatically qualifying for the Champions League. The 4th one has to go through the purgatory of the playoffs. Andy, why don't you do your star of the week first? Because mine is so serious, I don't want to have to do a handbrake turn from some great story you tell me into the very serious thing that I'm going to do.
Yeah, I'm going to go for Eliouai because I love a centre forward anyway. He's a player who looked brilliant when he first came through at Montpellier, but he's had a really rough last couple of years. It ran really aground for him at Eintracht Frankfurt. He, in his own words, would have walked to Nice to join on loan this winter. He has. We know Nice have had a rough old time at the moment, though, losing at home to Strasbourg yesterday. He came on in what will be Liam Rosenior's last match and got the equaliser against Rosenior and co. Brilliant goal, not looking like a guy short on confidence at all. And maybe he's someone who could be a big player for Nice as they try and pull away from the bottom and towards respectability.
As I say, my star of the week is a young footballer whose heroics in the last few days were nothing to do with the great game. Tyrese Dos Santos is a youth player with Metz. We've all been watching those terrible images of the nightclub fire and the subsequent tragedy in Crans-Montagna. He was in the fire. He got out, then realised that his girlfriend was still inside the burning building, went back in, got her out. She is safe and he is horribly injured. He's in the high dependency unit in the hospital there in the ski resort. Listen, we don't know what the future holds for him in football or in life. All we know is that the boy is an absolute hero. And when I first got told this story, I have to tell you, Andy, as you were telling it to me, that there were tears forming in my eyes. A horrible mess up there, of course, the whole thing. But there's some amazing things coming out of it. And Tyrese Dos Santos, hopefully someday soon, of Metz again, is our star of the week in France. Can't all be laughs and jokes, people. It can't all be laughs and jokes. Italy next here on Trans Europe Express.
$26K for 2026 on talkSPORT.
Yeah, talkSPORT is kicking off 2026 by giving you the chance to win a massive £26,000. At 12 p.m. this Friday, we'll be calling one lucky winner with a guaranteed payment made that day. Yep, one of you could pocket 26 grand. It's 26K for 2026, and here is how to enter. For your chance to win, just text WIN, W-I-N, to 83338. That's 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or you can call 0343 423 9761. Lines close at 12 p.m. on Friday. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. UK residents only and 18 plus. This is a network promotion. The full T's and C's are at talksport.com/win. So for your chance to win, text the word WIN, W-I-N, to 83338. Good luck, everybody. So, Andy, let's talk about football in Italy, where there have been matches. Some places there aren't matches. They're having a break, like in Germany. Our headline is Lazio sorry Sunday, because today Lazio lost 2-0 at home to Napoli. And this story and our next one not centre around, but certainly feature West Ham's struggles with keeping and using properly centre forwards. Because Lazio went into the game not giving themselves the best possible chance of beating Napoli.
No, and if you think Maurizio Sarri at the moment, recovering from a minor heart operation,
bless him, yeah,
should really be feeling calm and chilled and all the rest of it. And having arrived at the club and then, in his eyes, they fibbed to him by not telling him that they weren't going to be allowed to make any transfers for the first half of the season. They've got off on the wrong foot in this transfer window as well, which is just a couple of days old. Now, of course, we know that Tati Castellanos, the Argentinian striker who's in MLS before, he's going to be going to West Ham for 30 million euros. Now, that meant that they were very, very short, especially with current injuries and the like, going into the game against Napoli. Antonio Conte and company really took advantage of that. And they played really, really well. They've not always played well on the road this season, particularly after European games. But they looked, despite there being no real Christmas break, actually quite fresh. And bear in mind the amount of injuries that Napoli have at the moment as well. They had David Neres limp off in this as well. There was a heart in moment bit in the first half where Scott McTominay went down under a heavy challenge and got up and was limping about for a bit as well. But Napoli dealt with it really well. They won 2-0, could have been far more. And they had Tijani Noslin leading the line, Lazio. And him, as their one senior striker, of course he got himself sent off for a second booking.
Of course he did.
Later on. Of course he did. And then... with them being a bit stretched at the back as well, you had Marasic starting a fight with Matsocchi later on. Matsocchi got sent off as well, the Napoli player. He didn't really do anything apart from complain in Marasic's face that he just tried to kick him in the ribs, basically. So whether that red card stands, we'll see. But Sarri said afterwards, the club have known that it's a possibility that they could sell Castellanos for a long time. So why weren't we covered for it? Just why weren't we covered for it? It's just more exasperation with the powers that be at Lazio. They won't be getting European football, believe you me.
For the West Ham fans listening, and there will be many, Castellanos did really well in America. And okay on loan at Girona, I think it was, in Spain.
Yeah, he had his moments there. Yeah.
What kind of player will West Ham be getting for their 30 mil, Andy?
Well, look, if you want to forget the fact that buying a striker for 30 million euros when you're a Premier League club is not going to change your fortunes beyond recognition, just go onto YouTube and watch the time he scored 4 times against Real Madrid, and that will make you feel far better about everything. Castellanos is great on his day. You could see him working in the Premier League. He's strong. He can hold the ball up. He causes bother to defenders. He makes life uncomfortable, but he doesn't do it on a consistent enough basis. We're not talking about a vintage Lazio side. And the reality of the situation is when you go out and buy a player for like 30 million euros, 25 million quid, you're not going to get a player that's going to completely change things for you. You're going to get a player who can contribute a bit and hold his end up.
Thank you for that, Andy. In our ever never-ending search for more fun involving Antonio Conte, as you say, Sarri, his long-time rival, was hoping to be relaxed following his minor heart surgery. Conte appeared to be happier than he usually is by the middle of any football season, but he couldn't help having a slight swipe at his own club.
No, that's right. He was asked on what was going on in the transfer window, and he said, I don't really talk about these topics. And then he said, last year I said, let's not do too much, and then we sold Kvaratskhelia. And so he has got that magic Mourinho touch, really, of even when he's not trying to say something controversial, he says something controversial. And I think we can all be grateful for that.
Absolutely. As I say, West Ham centre forwards, past, present and future, featuring heavily in Italy. Milan kept up their challenge for the Scudetto with a 1-0 win against Cagliari on Friday night. A game that featured a current West Ham player.
Yeah, it did. Niklas Füllkrug, who'd been watching from the stands in the win over Verona last week, made a very impressive cameo, I thought, in the last 20 minutes. He came on as sub. By that point, Milan were already 1-0 up from a brilliant finish by Rafael Leao at Cagliari. And they had a tough old time of it, particularly in the first half when Cagliari really had a go at them. But it was a classic Max Allegri. Like, if they'd have been wearing Juventus shirts, you wouldn't have been stunned. You know, it felt like classic Juventus, really. That's where Milan are at the moment under Allegri, the full manifestation of Allegrismo, if you like. And Füllkrug, they've needed some sort of focal point, and he looked fit, he looked willing, he looked like that sort of witty player that we remember from Dortmund in the season that they got to the Champions League final. Look, poor old West Ham. You knew the minute he walked out the door there, he'd go out and be really good for someone else. It's typical that he leaves West Ham, where he's really badly struggled, and goes straight to a team at the top of Serie A. I have every sympathy for them.
Meanwhile, at the top of Serie A, Inter were playing tonight. A few minutes ago, you told us they were 2-up against Bologna. Is that still the case?
3-1 to Inter. So the goals scored by Zielinski. He opened the scoring in the first half with a brilliant left foot shot from just inside the area. And Lautaro and Marcus Thuram have since scored. As you know, in my view, the best front two in European football. Rather scruffy goal scored by Santiago Castro to pull one back for the visitors, where he sort of slipped over, pushed it into the ground. It hit Jan Sommer in the face and went in. But nevertheless, they're going towards the win, and that will put Inter top of the table. So assuming they hold out for this last 27 seconds, what we're looking at is Inter top on 39. This is after 17 games, not quite the halfway point in Italy. It's 20-team league, of course. Milan 38, Napoli 37, which I think is possibly a slightly better defence of their title than I thought we might get.
Yeah, absolutely. My star of the week is a familiar name to Premier League fans, Moise Kean. Of course, part of a Fiorentina team that's absolutely nailed to the bottom of the league just 10 days ago. He scored the winner in stoppage time for Fiorentina against Cremonese, Jamie Vardy's Cremonese, as local bylaws. I mean, I have to say, that was their second win of the season, following very quickly on the heels of their first win of the season. And for the first time this season, they're off the bottom. And with Fabio Paratici and his contacts book fleeing the environs of Tottenham Hotspur to go there any day soon, maybe just things are turning around for Fiorentina. Who is your star of the week, Andy, in Italy?
Well, for me, it has to be Gianpiero Gasperini, making his first return to Atalanta with Roma, and a wonderful reception for him from the crowd. Lots of banners showing their appreciation for the way he not just improved the team, but transformed the club, let's be honest. And he was clearly touched by that, despite being fairly cantankerous at this stage in life. It wasn't good enough for a win, though. The generosity didn't extend to points. A 1-0 win for Atalanta, which Rafael Palladino hopes will get his team's season going. An appropriately scummy goal by Giorgio Scalvini that probably shouldn't have been allowed. I mean, he did have his hand in the face of Miles Filar, the goalkeeper, as he scored it. But sometimes it's quite nice to see stuff let go, isn't it? You know, in this day of micromanaging football. But anyway, Roma, when they don't score, they don't only not win, they tend to lose. Not drawn at any games in Serie A yet this season, so I'm sure they'll be busy in the window trying to get their dream striker.
Final whistle gone in the San Siro. As you told Andy, it was only seconds to go. That one has ended. Inter Milan 3, Bologna 0, and the race for the Scudetto is as hot as ever as we head, we're already into 20. Bologna did get a goal. Of course, Castro got what turned out to be a consolation for them in a 3-1 victory for Inter. And that will be one of the fun things that happens this year, that race for the Scudetto. No football in Germany at the moment. They're having a midwinter break, but still brilliant stories for you, including a teenager giving the most backhanded compliment to his huge football club you could ever imagine. You're listening to Trans Europe Express. Yeah, welcome back to Trans Europe Express. And you know how sometimes something surprises you, and then other times your eyebrows actually want to take off the top of your head. I don't know why I'm so surprised by this, but how can I put this? One of our most informed French correspondents, not Andy Brassell, has just dropped this to us, that L'Equipe, the highly reputable French sports magazine, are reporting at the present moment that the shortlist to take over at Strasbourg from Liam Rosenior includes the name, Andy, of Gary O'Neill.
Wow. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
Sorry, I've thrown that hand grenade straight to you.
That's very interesting.
Interesting one, isn't it? Yeah. But of course, with these connections between Strasbourg and a big English club, you never know who's worked with who and all the rest of it. Because, behind the scenes, after all the data, it's all about personal relationships. All these directors of football, managers, agents, etc. It's all about personal contacts.
It is, and I think the interesting thing is there, not so much that Gary Neal could be taking over at Strasbourg, but if Gary Neal were to take over at Strasbourg, it'd be a medium-term bet for the Chelsea job.
Of course,
which is the maddest bit of it, isn't it?
That's fantastic. Let's turn to Germany, as we said we would. No football, but interesting stories. A lot of them to do with English players, perhaps moving to or from Germany. But our headline is Musiala on the mend, because if Bayern Munich needed a boost going into the second half of the season, it is the news that Jamal Musiala, arguably one of the top 3 or 4 players in the world, not just on his day, but in reality, is on his way back from his long injury. In fact, Andy, he thinks he should be playing already.
Yeah, that's right. If I was Jamal Musiala and I was going to turn up to a fan event and answer some questions on stage, I would stroll in and sit there and say, you know what, if it was up to me, I could have played a month ago. I really could have played a month ago, but we're just being on the safe side. And that's exactly what he did. He did exactly that. And is a mouth-watering prospect. Of course, they're going to have to find balance within that. But they were so reliant on Jamal Musiala before. Let's go back to spring last year when they were in the quarterfinals, of course, of the Champions League. And they ran into pretty close despite losing the home leg in Munich. Mm-hmm. And the thing that they really lacked, Jamal Musiala.
Yeah.
And yet this season, they've looked great without him. They've looked absolutely fantastic. So we look at the Bundesliga table at half time, and they are, after 15 games, 9 points clear, Bayern. And I'm not sure that really puts into words quite how good they've been as well. They've dropped 4 points in those first 15 games. And so really it's about adding something in a Champions League context, a competition in which they've also been really good, if we're being honest, give or take that defeat to Arsenal. And we can forgive them the second half there, I think it's fair to say. So I guess the question is, where does this leave, say, Lennart Karl, for example?
Well, in Lennart's own mind, Andy, it may leave him, an even bigger club, because the other, in the absence of Musiala, one of the stars of Bayern Munich's brilliant season so far has been Lennart Karl. What is he, 17? Soon to be 18. And he has done brilliantly, playing usually ahead of Harry Kane. Kane's sort of taken up a 10 notionally to accommodate the young man. I'm not sure if I was playing for Bayern Munich, I'd be bringing up quotes like this. These are direct quotes from Lennart Karl over the last 24 hours. Bayern are a very, very big club. It's a dream to play here. But at some point, I definitely want to go to Real Madrid. That's my dream club. Of course, Bayern is something very special, and it's a lot of fun at the club, he told Sky Sports Germany. But actually, this is a reflection, Andy, of the fact that despite having lashed out lots of money in recent times on people like Michael Olise and Harry Kane to great effect, Bayern still aren't one of... The players still don't think of them as one of the super giants of European football.
No, maybe not, Danny. And I think it's quite interesting that the players that they've been able to get, even the biggest ones, have been subordinate to what the real elite clubs, certainly in financial terms, want. And, the fact is that Kane and Manchester City's moment passed. The fact is that Luis Diaz. Liverpool didn't want to pay him what he wanted. So they've been able to make these signings, as we've said before, that have been able to convince themselves that, yeah, we're elite. We're absolutely elite. And of course, on the pitch, they absolutely are elite. There's no question about that. But in terms of their strength in the transfer market, I mean, they were never into paying big wages, big fees, remember. That's only something that's changed with Lucas Hernandez and Kane and players like that in the last 5 years, really. But I think the difference is that because the Bundesliga is such an international market for players now, that Bayern can't just go and say, right, this is the team that's irritating us the most. We're going to go and nick their best players. I mean, basically, that's what Dortmund do to the teams below them now, because they're left with Bayern's old contacts book. That's their stature in the German game at the moment. They're left with their old plays, and Bayern, they've got to move on. And I'm sure this is another one of those things, just like Wirtz going to Liverpool or Woltemade going to Newcastle, that will come as a bit of a horrible shock to them.
Absolutely. Andy, we've only got a few minutes to do this, so I rely on your precision here. Post Jadon Sancho, of course, the Bundesliga, one of the most fashionable things is to get young English players in. And we're seeing a lot of that movement in January between the Premier League and the Bundesliga that perhaps 5 years ago we wouldn't have seen. Yeah,
so if we're thinking very much of Jadon Sancho and Jamie Gittins, for example. I guess the latest name on that list is going to be Jemiah Simpson-Puzzi, who belonged to Manchester City, belongs still to Manchester City, and was loaned to Celtic for the first half of the season, didn't really get a lot of game time there. Now, he's going to Köln. They will have an option to buy him permanently at the end of that, and it'll be interesting to see how he gets on and whether they're able to do so as well. And he'll go straight into the team because they've got a ton of defensive injuries at the moment as well. So good luck to Simpson-Puzzi. As well, if we're talking about not strictly English players, Arno Calimuendo, we know Eintracht Frankfurt are going to be really busy in this transfer window. Hasn't really worked out for him at Forest, and they're still feeling a bit the lack of Hugo Ekitike. They have bought Younes Ebnou Talib, who is the top scorer in the Bundesliga's FI as well.
Yeah, we'll talk about two Tottenham centre-halves, young centre-halves, because Kota Takai is going to Mönchengladbach, having never, because of his injury, having never put a boot on yet for Spurs. And we'll come on to Luka Vuskovic in just a second. But I want to talk about Daniel Perez, the goalkeeper, who is doing... I mean, he's trying to get out of a big team in the Bundesliga. So he's gone on strike to go to Southampton is the basis of this story.
Yeah, I mean, that's something pretty special, isn't it? So he went to Hamburg to get minutes in the Bundesliga this season. They decided pretty early on, or Merlin Polson decided pretty early on that Daniel Hoyer Fernandez, who was already his first choice goalkeeper, was going to stay his first choice goalkeeper. So Perez, to try and get this move to Southampton, has gone on strike. Now, I think for a while he hoped that the fact that there's snow all over the pitches on Hamburg would sort of mean that training was called off, so he wouldn't have to officially go on strike. But they've been very good at clearing the pitches, so he has had to properly go on strike. They won't let him go to Southampton until they get a replacement.
And finally, Tottenham and nowadays Croatia centre-half Luka Vuskovic, another one who has yet, after 2.5 years as a Spurs player, has yet to play for Spurs, but is doing it so well in Hamburg that Spurs are now fielding phone calls from the likes of Dortmund and Bayern Munich, as I understand it. Spurs have got a tricky situation to manage here in the next couple of transfer windows.
Yeah, I mean, look, he is clearly enormously popular there. His dad was out saying it's his dream to play with his brother Mario, who, of course, is Hamburg affiliated, but his drugs ban isn't up until November, and the loan deal for Luka expires in June. Now, Rafael van der Vaart has got connections to both clubs, put his oar in and said, look, I think it would be better for him to stay and play another year at Hamburg, so he's actually playing, not just in the periphery in the Premier League. Look, I think you look at the talent of him, it's absolutely clear. He's one of the best defenders in the league already. He's either going back to Spurs or they're going to use him as collateral and sell him to a bigger club.
Thank you very much. There is no such thing, Andy, as you well know. No Star of the Week in Germany because they're all too lazy to play over the new year. Thank you for listening to the first hour of Trans Europe Express. We are going to rattle through another fact and fun-filled second hour very, very soon here on talkSPORT.
The Premier League's profit and sustainability rules are sold to us as financial fair play, a way to keep clubs from going bust. But there are those who feel it's starting to look a lot like a system that protects the big boys and keeps the rest in their lane. Here's how it works and why people feel that way. So clubs can only lose 105 million quid over 3 years, which sounds fair, but here's the kicker. Your limit includes how much you earn. So if you're one of the traditional top 6, you've got massive global revenue streams and you can spend way more while still technically following the rules. Meanwhile, ambitious clubs who've got money like Newcastle, Villa or Forest, well, they're bringing a knife to a gunfight. Newcastle might be backed by Saudi billions, but they just can't splurge the cash. Their commercial income isn't there yet. Want to buy world-class talent? Well, PSR says to them, your owner might have the money, but you're not making enough in shirt sales in Asia for that. The Magpies won their first domestic trophy since 1955, qualified for the Champions League, which you'd think would be a great springboard for them to go on and start building a team to challenge at the top. But because of PSR restraints, they couldn't break their wage structure for a new Alexander Isak contract, and look what's happened there. Nottingham Forest tried to invest to survive. They did that, but they got punished anyway. Meanwhile, clubs like Spurs, until last season, hadn't won a trophy in over 18 years, but because they rake in cash from the new stadium, they get a much bigger PSR allowance than a newly promoted club who are just trying to stay up. And let's not forget the loopholes these big boys are exploiting. Chelsea found the trick with those long contracts, selling the women's team. City are masters of related party sponsorships. Etihad this, Etisalat that, all within the rules, and fair play to them for capitalising on those opportunities. But what about the smaller clubs? They don't have that luxury. Now look, financial sustainability matters. Nobody wants another Bury or Morecambe situation. But there's increasing concern that rather than levelling the playing field, the current rules cement the existing hierarchy. So what's the solution? We'll either loosen the reins so ambitious clubs can spend within their means, or cap spending based on something other than revenue. Otherwise, we're just watching the same 6 teams swapping silverware most seasons while the rest play musical chairs for 7th. And that, folks, ain't what the Premier League was built on.
Yeah, massive welcome everybody to the second hour of 3 of tonight's edition of Trans Europe Express. Lots to get. I'm Danny Kelly. Andy Brassell is here with me, of course. We've got some great guests for you in the next 2 hours. During the next 60 minutes, we'll be having Mbappe Watch. We'll also be looking at everything that's been going on in Spain, including a very bitter derby between the two clubs in Barcelona, which will take us on to Lee Davey telling us all about a very friendly derby tonight between Paris Saint-Germain and Paris FC, the first one in the French capital for nearly half a century. And at 11:15, as a New Year's treat, we'll do a bit of a Q&A. Get in touch with us on Twitter and we'll answer. All the usual offices are opening at 81089. 81089. Text us a question you want Andy and I to answer about football in Europe in the next few months, and we'll try and do that as well. Welcome back, one. Welcome back, all, to Trans Europe Express, where it's now time for this.
Carrière, le Paris Saint-Germain, Mbappe! Mbappe! Little give and go, Mbappe's in! Oh, it's 2-2! He scored twice in 2 minutes! Tête de Kylian Mbappe. Allez, Kylian!
Well, Mbappe Watch starts, Andy, this week with Mbappe watching. Because I know I saved it up for an award-winning joke. He was in the stands for the game against Real Betis today because of a variety of sore finger and a knee injury. He's out for the next 3 weeks, is it?
Yeah, that's right. Which broke in the last couple of days, and this was always going to be a pivotal moment in Real Madrid's season. Not just because there was a 4-point gap to Barcelona as they restarted La Liga, which is maintained as they both won this weekend, but also this was the moment where we were going to work out how far off it that Real Madrid were under Xabi Alonso, because we know that they've had a few problems, and a lot of those problems have been the ones before that Carlo Ancelotti had, like no fit defenders. But the mayonnaise has taken a while to take, as they say in France. It didn't feel like a really smooth transition to Xabi Alonso so far, and that, as well as the results, has been one of the major question marks over his reign so far. And it has felt, really, in the first half of the season, as if Kylian Mbappe has simply propped them up with his goals, as he's been playing the best that he's played in the last couple of years, quite apart from the numbers as well. So where would they be without him? Well, enter the doubt, enter Gonzalo Garcia. And Gonzalo Garcia made such an impression at the Club World Cup that he was able to keep Endrick out of getting any playing minutes at all, really, for the first half of the season, which led to his loan move to Lyon. And he wasn't able to make a massive impression himself. He'd not scored at all in La Liga before this. And so he comes in today and he gets a hat-trick against Real Betis. And bear in mind, you expect Real Madrid to beat Betis at the Bernabeu, perhaps. Betis had not lost an away game in La Liga this season, and they shipped 5 at Real Madrid this afternoon. And that shows you this was one of the best Real Madrid performances of this season, and really inspired by the Cantereros. So the guys from the Cantera, the youth academy, La Fábrica, is not nearly well known as La Masia, the Barcelona one, even though it's produced a heck of a lot of top-level footballers. Not all of those top-level footballers have ended up playing for Real Madrid, of course. But Gonzalo Garcia, going from being useful joker, possible equivalent to Joselu, the guy who could provide a bit of extra presence in that centre-forward position. The quality of the finishes today was unbelievable. And as part of something else, as Xabi Alonso himself, who, of course, very well knows his football history, knows exactly what young players mean to Real Madrid, even if not perhaps in the same volume as Barcelona, he was saying this is a major deal for us in the press conference afterwards, because not just Gonzalo Garcia, but with Raul Asensio and Fran Garcia scoring as well, the 5 goals all scored by youth products. And this is a first for Real Madrid since 1989, when you had the team built around the Quinta del Buitre. So this is, over 10 years before the first Galactico era, and this was the Quinta del Buitre, which was sort of roughly translates as Vulture Squadron, was led by Emilio Butragueño, of course, had Manolo Sanchez in it, Michel, one of the most loved teams actually in Real Madrid history, even though they weren't actually able to win a European Cup. They won 5 successive La Ligas, but they were knocked out in the semi-finals of the European Cup in '88 by PSV, which was, Butragueño said afterwards, it was the one that really got away and the scar that never healed. And in 1989, when they were knocked out by that brilliant Milan team that went on to win the European Cup twice in a row. So it felt like a really, really historic day, I think especially for Real Madrid supporters of a certain age.
And Andy, you're right to say that the Milan academy churns out footballers, but they are learning to be quite smart about this. The example I'd use is that, of course, they produce Nico Paz these days, very much a staple in Argentina's starting 11. He's gone off to Como, where on loan, with a buyback clause to Real Madrid of really nothing, buttons. And this summer, I happen to know Spurs offered Como a tremendous amount of money for Paz, and Real Madrid intervened and told him, hang on there, play your football, forget about the big pay rise for now, play your football for another year and we'll come back and get you. And they've got a number of these players now parked around Europe on these buyback clauses.
Yeah, they do. Another one being Chema, who's started pretty well at Stuttgart as well. He looks pretty special and has settled fairly well to the Bundesliga. And it's something that's been pointed out, Danny, as you say, a number of times, the fact that they could buy these players back for buttons, and they're huge amounts of collateral, even if they don't want to play them ever. You know, as you say, they could sign Nico Paz back for €8 million and maybe sell him for 60, 70. You know, here's a guy who looks like one of the
€70 million Spurs offered for him.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like one of the best midfield players in Europe at the moment.
Speaking of which, then, because I'm really, you were the first person to start to point out to me that potential is now more expensive than actual stardom, because, they need replacements at the back. I think it's fair to say Real Madrid, but also in midfield where they're short and haven't really replaced Cruz and probably need number 6. And there you get to a situation where, to me, the obvious one to go for is the German player Angelo Stiller.
Same.
It looks like everything that they should be going for. And yet it looks more likely that they'll go and pay much more for a 19-year-old, and you'll tell us who he is, in Holland, in the Netherlands, who's not even in the Dutch squad yet.
Yeah, it's remarkable, really. So
it's something Keith Smith, isn't it?
That's right, and we know there's interest in him from the Premier League as well. Newcastle have been interested in him, but once Real Madrid turn up, I think that chance has probably been and gone for them. Not only because it allows Real Madrid to push the price up, and we know that Real Madrid, like a lot of elite clubs now, like to get in young players and mould them. And I guess you could say this is the pepification of football, really. You look at someone like Phil Foden, who rather than being loaned out into League One or League Two, or even loaned out to the Bundesliga, because Dortmund were really interested in him at one point, post Sancho, he's like, no, you're going to develop under me. I'm the one who I trust to develop that player. And, I think if we're talking about the value that Xabi Alonso could have for Real Madrid, surely developing young players really has to be part of that as well going forward. So I think getting in a player young who you think has got a way to go, and you're looking at the potential rather than the player that he actually is at the moment, even though Smith is clearly a good player for the moment, he's not of the level of Angelo Stiller. And of course, always the Bundesliga connection and the fact that Alonso was a big fan of Stiller from his time at Leverkusen made that seem more obvious. Now, of course, I'm talking about this like Alonso's going to get a say in it, and Alonso's still going to be there at the end of the season, which, is a no and a maybe not as well. So we'll have to wait and see.
To me, it's not just Toni Kroos. A Real Madrid side without a German midfielder is not a Real Madrid side for me. I'm thinking back to Gunter Netzer now, people like that, really
absolutely.
Fantastic players, yeah.
Absolutely. Interestingly, when we talk about replacing Kroos, seeing the re-emergence of Rodrigo in recent weeks, of course, that match against Manchester City, even though it was a losing effort, ever since then, he's been unmovable from the first 11. And, we always felt, didn't we, Danny, that he's a really Xabi Alonso sort of player. It would only be a matter of time before he became one of his key guys. I think the interesting thing, certainly looking at the game today and a couple of others in recent weeks, is how good he is from a dead ball. They've had no one that can deliver free kicks and corners like Rodrigo can since Toni Kroos.
I always, whenever I talk about a footballer who's older than myself, I always check to see that they're still alive. I'm delighted to say the great Gunter Netzer, with his flowing blonde locks, of course he destroyed England in a famous game at Wembley, is still very much with us, which is good to see. Thank you very much for all of that. Should just let you know, for cricket fans among you, that we believe that the second day of the 5th Test in Sydney is going to start half an hour early because of the light and rain interruptions last night. We'll confirm all that for you very soon, and we'll be getting regular updates on the play, particularly if wickets fall or if England suddenly smash all kinds of batting records, from our cricket correspondent John Norman. That's around 45 minutes away from start of play there in Australia. Next up here, though, we're going to talk about everything that's been happening in Spain. Andy, the games have ended now in France. We heard about the results in Italy, France and Spain as well. Tell us those results, please.
Yeah, so it ended in France. Paris Saint-Germain 2, Paris FC 1. Closer than a lot of people thought it would be, and we'll hear a bit more about that later from Lee Davey, who's been covering that for us. And the one in Spain, the late one in Spain, Real Sociedad 1, Atletico Madrid 1. All the action at the start of the second half, and Atletico disappointed with a point, but maybe quite lucky to get it again. We'll come to that in a second.
Okay, well, let's talk about Spain then, where our headline is Saint Joan. Reflecting on the high arts there. Thank you very much. To talk about one, Joan Garcia, the goalkeeper of Barcelona, but until recently the goalkeeper of their little brother, if I might be so bold, and certainly bitter city rivals, Espanyol. Well, the two teams met today.
Yeah, that's right. I think, Danny, because Espanyol don't have anywhere near the global reach or even Europe-wide reach of Barcelona. It's sometimes lost on people what a bitter rivalry this is. Of course, mainly from the Espanyol direction, you could argue, because they're always having to live in the shadow of Barcelona. So to have a youth player come through, succeed, and then when he starts to make it, choose to go to Barcelona instead to live the best years of his career, it hurts, and they're always going to be upset about it. Now, so much said in the build-up to this game, which was Joan Garcia's first return to Cornellà to face Espanyol as a Barcelona player, that Espanyol fans have been going around markets in Barcelona trying to find ways to source rats to throw it in and all this sort of stuff. I don't know what sort of market sells rats, alive or dead.
But, maybe there's a branch of Rats You Like in downtown Barca. Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, possibly. But anyway, it turned out to be a lot of hot air, although simply unable to source them because we just had pictures of rats in the crowd on banners and placards, as well as Euro notes as well. Lots of unpleasant chants, booed every time he touched the ball. And he showed exactly what he was made of. He had his game of the season. Now, Garcia's already been really influential for Barcelona this season, of course, has pushed Marc-Andre ter Stegen down the pecking order. But he's absolutely fantastic, and he had a really, really imperious game because Barcelona weren't great. Espanyol, who've improved a lot this season, of course, they've got Tyrese Dolan from Blackburn, who joined them in the summer on the right-hand side, playing another really good game, I thought, for them. But his best save of all the ones he made was from Carlos Romero, where he had to sort of change in mid-dive, in mid-air, to fingertip a header from close range over the top in the first half. And then Barcelona picked them off in the closing minutes of the game. Two brilliant assists from Fermín. First for Dani Olmo with a fantastic finish from the edge of the box, and one that he put on a plate for Robert Lewandowski that Lewandowski still almost managed to miss. He kind of kicked it into his own chest and it went in. But a brilliant contribution from Fermín as well. But Joan Garcia's night, no doubt about that.
Andy, we haven't rehearsed this, so I'm just going to throw this to you. Marc-Andre ter Stegen, with the transfer window open, can he stand to be on the bench at Barcelona in a World Cup year?
Well, he won't be playing for Spain. He won't be playing. Well, he definitely won't be playing for Spain at the World Cup. He won't be playing for Germany at the World Cup if he can't get his move. There's no doubt about that.
That's my point,
one of the main problems for Marc-Andre ter Stegen, if you think that he was initially knocked off his perch by his injury, the other thing that did is put him in a position where he couldn't move at the point where lots of elite teams were looking for goalkeepers. Now, especially, actually, if we're looking at the Turkish Super League, and that as a destination, you had the biggest teams picking up goalkeepers there last summer. You had Ederson going to Fenerbahce, in the end, Uğurcan going to the national team goalkeeper, going to Galatasaray.
Yeah.
And when all those other names were mentioned, of course, Emiliano Martinez, there would have been keenness in ter Stegen, definitely, but he's missed that boat. So, there's not a lot of obvious places for him to go, especially as one of Barcelona's highest earners, but he's going to have to get somewhere to play.
Yeah, we'll talk about this at about midnight. We'll talk about who's coming and going in the Turkish league, because it's just fantastic, some of the rumours. Meanwhile, Andy, Atletico Madrid were playing against Real Sociedad, as you said, in a 1-1 draw there. They're off now then to the Spanish Super Cuppa in Saudi Arabia. Tell us about that.
Yeah, they are. So it's been an expanded format, very much in line with the Italian Super Coppa in the last couple of years, with a long-term deal to be staged in Saudi Arabia, which not everyone's happy about. In fact,
for different reasons, actually, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, Iñaki Williams of Athletic was asked about it, and he responded with an expletive to what he thought about it. Mainly in his case because his wife's about to give birth, and it's a really real pain in the backside for him to be in Saudi rather than in Spain. But Simon, the Athletic and national team goalkeeper, had talked about it last week and said, look, the fact is, our fans aren't going to go in any great numbers. You know, we're talking about big matches where you could get loads of fans coming if it was in Spain, and maybe you'll have a couple of thousand going. And funnily enough, of course, this is interesting hearing this from a player who's already been a Supercopa in Saudi. He said the fans who have gone won't be going back, which was his take on the experience. Now, of course, there were the moments with Mallorca fans there, some of their wives and girlfriends allegedly harassed by locals on their way out of the stadium in one of those Supercopa games last year. So presumably security will have a tighter rein preventing any incidents like that next time, which of course shouldn't be happening in the first place. But Atletico Madrid really could have done with a win tonight to get off in good style to the Supercopa. Took the lead. Alex Sorloth scoring at the start of the second half against his former club, heading in across from Giuliano Simeone, and Conor Gallagher having a brilliant chance to make it 2-0 just after, making one of those trademark breaks from midfield and putting it into the side netting. Now, quite soon after that, you had the Real Sociedad equaliser, Take Kubo setting up another former Premier League player, Gonzalo Guedes, for a great finish by Guedes.
Wolves fans, close your ears.
Exactly. And after that, he's been playing really well last couple of months. And after that, Real Sociedad looked the more likely to win. Now, of course, it's fair enough that we look at it because we're looking at the top of the table from an Atletico Madrid perspective. I mean, they are well off the pace in the title race now. They're in fourth place and in the spot that they always seem to be, no matter how much money they spend on players, just not quite in the title race. But it was a big result for Real Sociedad as well, and one that they really went for the win for a reason, because they're fourth bottom at the moment. Their first game under their new coach, Pellegrino Matarazzo, coaching in league football out of Germany for the first time, the US German. He has previously been at Hoffenheim and at Stuttgart. And so a bit of a leap for them, but really, really encouraging first effort from Matarazzo's Real Sociedad.
You mentioned that, Atletico Madrid not being able to, punch their way into the very top, into the title race. A team who are doing very well still, though, Villarreal, and they could take advantage of all the other title contenders having to go off to Saudi Arabia. Yeah,
so this is why I wasn't point specific actually before when I was talking about Atletico Madrid dropping out of the title race, because I'm going to read you through the top of the table at the moment. They went and won 3-1 at Elche this weekend. Again, a brilliant opening goal by Alberto Molero, who has come in this season from Las Palmas and just looks fantastic. He looked really good with Las Palmas, but you can never really know if they're going to step up to the next level. And he's been brilliant for a Champions League contender, not a contender in the actual Champions League, because, of course, they've been very poor in that, but they've been good in La Liga and on the fringes of the title race. Another for Georgi Mikatadze, as well as Antonio Pedraza. And it's difficult to win at Elche. Elche have been really good out of the promoted sides this season. So that win leaves them in a good situation because they've got a couple of extra games to play as well, at least one of which they'll be catching up while other teams are off at the Supercopa. So this is the top of La Liga at the moment. Barcelona in first with 49. Real Madrid second with 45. Villarreal with 38, the same as Atletico, but they've played 2 games less than all those other 3. So if they were to win those 2 games, that would put them to 44, which would still keep them in third, but just 5 points off the top and only 1 point behind Real Madrid.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a real good chance there to do something, that their form in Europe suggested that they wouldn't be doing. So who's your star of the week in Spain, Andy?
It's got to be Borja Iglesias. Couple of goals for the big man as Celta Vigo ran over Valencia 4-1 at the Balaídos.
Okay, well, mine is a name familiar to Premier League fans, of course. Goalkeeper Matt Ryan, these days plying his trade, as people say, at Levante. Well, they had an important win against Seville, a Seville team about to be brought up, we understand, by a consortium headed by Sergio Ramos, because he started and ended his career at Seville. Well, they were 2-0 ahead were Levante. The game could have changed when Seville got a penalty, but Ryan saved the penalty and then in a stupendous piece of athleticism saved the follow-up as well. If you get a chance to look at it, Isaac Romero was the player involved with both the penalty and the follow-up chance. But Matt Ryan, still an excellent goalkeeper, defied him and they went on to win. Of course, Levante went up the other end and scored to make it 3-0. And Matt is my star of the week in Spain. Okay, historic day in Paris when the champions of Europe, Paris Saint-Germain, met their local rivals, Paris FC, in the first French capital derby for nearly 50 years. And when I say local rivals, I mean very local. We're going to talk all about that game and the history of how it's come about and what happened tonight with Lee Davey, French football expert, will be joining us next up here on Trans Europe Express.
$26K for 2026 on talkSPORT.
Yeah, talkSPORT is kicking off 2026 by giving you the chance to win a massive £26,000. At midday this Friday, 12 midday this Friday, we'll be calling one lucky winner with a guaranteed payment that day. Yep, one of you could pocket 26 grand. It's 26K for 2026, and here's how to enter. For your chance to win, just text the word WIN, W-I-N, to 83338. Text will cost £2.50 plus standard network rate, or you can call 0343 423 9761. The line's closed, as I say, on Friday at 12 midday. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. It's UK residents only, 18 plus. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's are at talksport.com/win. So once again, for your chance to win, just text that word WIN to 83338. Do it now, and the best of luck to you. Okay, as I was saying, we heard the result, but it's so much more than just the result. Paris Saint-Germain this evening have beaten Paris FC by 2-1 in the first Paris derby for 47 years. To talk about that, how it came about, the history between the two clubs, Paris football expert, and very much part of the furniture here at Trans Europe Express, Lee Davey joins us. Hi, Lee.
Hello, gents. How are you?
Really, really good, and great to hear your voice on air. Lee, tell us something of the background, the history of these two clubs, and then you can tell us something about the proximity of them, because I noticed that this weekend we've had the Dundee derby, and when I first walked down the Dens Road to see that those clubs were literally a decent goal kick apart, but they might as well be on different continents compared to these two clubs. But tell us something about the history of PSG and Paris FC.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Paris Football Club was founded in 1969, but it was founded with the intention of creating a huge capital club. They merged. So two teams merged. One was Paris Football Club and the other club with Stade Saint-Germain, which were based on the suburbs of Paris and Saint-Germain-en-Laye. They were together for a very, very short period. There was disagreements with the local council and the mayor, who didn't want the football club based in the suburbs. They split in 1972. Paris Football Club remained in Division 1. They kept their status. And Paris Saint-Germain were sent to the third tier. So things started to change very, very quickly. Paris FC were relegated. Paris Saint-Germain were promoted and got back to Division 1. And the rest is history, as they say. Paris Saint-Germain then took on ownership of the Parc des Princes. And Paris FC have pretty much been in the doldrums since then.
Until the last season, when they got promoted, which left us with the mouth-watering prospect of this derby that's happened today between the two clubs. We'll talk about the ambitions of Paris FC in a second, but just tell us about how proximitous these two clubs are to each other.
Absolutely. You spoke earlier about the Dundee derby. Well, these two clubs are separated by 15 metres.
15
metres. 15 metres. The road is a very small road called the Boulevard Murat. It's that small that even PSG couldn't even put their ticket office in their stadium. It's actually in Paris FC's stadium across the road. It's incredible. And as rugby fans will know that the Stade Jean-Bouin, which is the home of Paris FC, is actually the home of Stade Francais, their very famous rugby club there. And it's a multi-purpose built stadium over the road, and I'm sure it was a pretty quick journey for those Paris FC fans that were in attendance at the Parc des Princes tonight.
I'm just looking at an aerial photograph of the two stadia now, and I mean, you're not joking. A decent long jumper could jump from the roof of one to the other. It's an extraordinary sight, the two stadiums, because Paris FC Stadium is not some little outcrop. It's quite a large stadium itself. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Now, what has happened, Lee, to allow Paris FC to suddenly be back in the game? They've become part of the Red Bull group, haven't they? I think that's been the most important thing that's happened to them in recent years.
That's correct. Yeah, they're part of the Red Bull group, which happened last year, which sees Jurgen Klopp, as you know, is the direct, well, certainly one of the global head of soccer, as his title is. So he was there. He was there tonight in attendance. But they're also backed by the Arnold family. And anybody who doesn't know about the Arnold family, they are, as according to Forbes, the fourth richest family in the world. And and they have a wealth of over £150 billion. So a lot of wealth in across the two main Paris clubs at the moment. And I'm pretty sure that they're hoping to be in Paris Saint-Germain's position one day. They're a hell of a way away from that right now, but you know, there's a lot of hope that they can shake up the hierarchy in the French capital in the years to come.
And I guess, Lee, if we look at the game tonight, which was closer than a lot of people would have expected, as we said, Desiree Doué gave PSG the lead in the first half. Equaliser by William Gerbils from the penalty spot in the second half. And pretty much straight away, PSG went up the other end and got their noses back in front via Ousmane Dembélé. But PFC won't be looking for a little pat on the back, will they? Because, as you said, they came up with the Louis Vuitton weight of cash behind them, with the sporting know-how of Red Bull with them. And Jurgen Klopp has been very present. And yes, he has got that Paris FC cap out the club shop. He always kits himself out in the gear from the club shop, doesn't he? And people expected, I think, a little bit more of them, didn't they? I mean, they've not won in, 6 games now. The last time they won was at the start of November. And they're just hovering over the relegation zone. And funnily enough, I think if you look at the team and the squad, it's not really a squad that's built to battle relegation. It's a squad that is built with higher ambitions in mind. Is this going to be a bit of a problem for them in terms of consolidating, do you think?
I think so, yeah, I think so. I mean, they sit one place above the bottom 3 now. I don't think anybody, certainly at Paris FC, would have expected that to be the case at the midpoint of the season. You would have seen they've been linked with some pretty high-profile names in recent times. There's a link with Paul Pogba at one point. N'Golo Kante's been, perennially linked there as well. So they are aiming high. And the sad fact about it really is that, when you look at their squad, there's some talented players there. Unfortunately for them tonight, they missed 2 of their real biggest talents in Jean-Philippe Crasso and Ilan Cabal, who are at the Africa Cup of Nations, and they really missed them tonight. But, they've got something about them, and just a little bit more belief. I mean, I watched the game tonight, and, as many teams do, they come to the Parc des Princes, they'll park the bus and, and try and nick a point. But going, as you quite rightly pointed out, when they went 1-0 down just before half time, and they came out in the second half, they're a completely different team, and they really caused PSG a few problems actually. And as you quite rightly said, it wasn't straightforward for PSG, and I just think that if they just had a little bit of belief, just to from the get go, I think they really could have nicked something in the end. They had a couple of chances towards the end of the game as well, but yeah, ultimately, that's not going to relegate them or put them in a relegation battle. They've got to win those games around them, and ultimately they're not in a great run of form at the moment. But hopefully if they get a couple of players back, maybe bring 1 or 2 new faces in January, you'd think they may have enough to pull clear. But I think it's going to be a bit touch and go this season. I don't think it's going to be easy.
And Lee, this weekend alone, I said there was the Dundee derby. There was a rather low-key Glasgow derby because Celtic were so poor in the second half. We've heard about the bitterness of the derby in Barcelona this weekend at Espanyol's stadium. What was the atmosphere like today at Paris Saint-Germain? I think when we discussed this earlier, you said it was quite a friendly, almost festival atmosphere.
It was, and I think we went into the unknown a little bit, Danny, on this one, because again, there's no particular history of these matches, not in recent memory anyway. So nobody really knew what to expect from this. To kick off, it was there was some nice tifos, very pleasant. There was one that said Paris, we are Paris, and kind of almost like a collective one, welcome. There was another one that it was a really quite a nice, heartwarming one actually. It was a really well done tifo that had the descriptive words of when the teams were registered back in 1970 and they merged, and they put that into a huge banner, and that was quite nice. But there was no real animosity. It wasn't one of those derbies that were, it was no blood and thunder. It was just felt like another Liga match, and I can't really see this developing into anything like you've spoken, like an Old Firm derby or anything that you've spoken about in terms of the other derbies this weekend. No. But one maybe in the future that could have a little bit of rivalry based on honours, depending on how well backed Paris FC continue to be. But the only way I could kind of put this is that PSG's eyes are always on Marseille when it comes to rivalry. And in the dying minutes of the game tonight, the game was stopped because PSG was 1 or 2 unsavoury chants aimed at Marseille, not at Paris FC, but at Marseille, their opponents on Thursday night in the equivalent of the French Super Cup.
As you say, this has been come about partially because the Arnaud family have taken control of Paris FC. And for those of you, as Lee pointed out, they are the 4th richest family in the world. And Paris FC might be the most luxurious football club in the world now, because among the other things, and there are millions of them, a myriad of them, the Arnaud family own, They owe Louis Vuitton the ridiculously expensive luggage operation. They own Moet and Chandon champagne, and they owe Hennessy brandy, drink of choice of rappers back in the old school. Listen, Lee, it's been an absolute joy. Thank you so much for joining us to give us all the background and report on that big derby tonight in Paris. Thanks to Lee Davey there, who are joining us here on Trans Europe Express, where next up Andy and I will be trying to answer your questions as best we can. Yeah, let me just tell you about a brand new podcast for you now, How to Win the World Cup. Join comedian Matt Ford as we dive headfirst into the podcast that will hopefully give us all the answers as we learn what it really takes to win the World Cup. In the latest episode, he is joined by World Cup champion Emmanuel Petit as he relives his greatest sporting moment. That's How to Win the World Cup, a podcast available now on the talkSPORT app or on your favourite podcast provider. Right, Andy, we thought as it was the new year we'd give the listeners, downloaders, viewers, whatever they are these days, a chance to ask us a few questions. I want to start straight away with your wide and expansive knowledge of Portuguese football. Amanda, who has outed herself as a sporting fan, says, can you see Ruben Amorim making a return to Portuguese football, continuing, given that he continues to be under pressure at Manchester United?
You know, it's funny because the obvious spot for him would always be Sporting, wouldn't it? To go back there,
you'd have thought so, yes,
and finish what he started. But Rui Borges has done absolutely nothing to be fired before the former Guimarães coach who took the helm, who saw them over the line last season after they made the misstep of appointing João Pereira from the B team. And Borges has continued to make them very, very competitive this season, even if they're a bit off the lead now, with Porto going up and away at the top, as we'll talk about later. So I think if he was going to go somewhere, it would not be Portugal. I think Spain is a possibility for him as well. But it will be difficult, I think, for Ruben Amorim to find a spot, because it's really hard for the neutral, who's maybe not that familiar with his work at Sporting, to judge his value, just as it's difficult to judge the value of players when they leave Manchester United as well. Of course, they can always pleasantly surprise us, like Lukaku and Scott McTominay.
Yeah, I mean, Rasmus Højlund, yeah. Manny, who's a Chelsea fan, says, Andy, and I think he knows that you have a special place in your heart for Lyon. How excited are you about Endrick joining Lyon on loan this season? And what do you think it could do for the lad's development?
If this is an effort to get me to take my shirt off on the live stream and swing it around my head, I'm afraid it's too late on a Sunday for me to do that. But
and also, I've got to survive that, Andy, so don't do that at least, yeah.
Yeah, we won't do that. It's very exciting, and people in Lyon are very excited about it as well. I think when you look at what they're lacking, it's clearly a centre forward, and it has been all season. But as the win at Monaco proved yesterday, this is a good team that's got a chance of qualifying for the Champions League this season. It just needs that goal scorer. So if he hits the ground running, Lyon are in a good position, I think. And in terms of what it can do for his development, to be at a team in Europe for the first time where he is the centre of things, I think he'll respond very positively to that. I think,
and he's going to get loads of game time at Lyon as well, isn't he?
Oh yeah, he absolutely will. If he's available, he'll play. I don't have any doubt about that. And I think to have that feeling of being the man is something that he's always responded to. He responded to it on his Brazil debut at Wembley as well. So he's a player who likes responsibility, and he'll get it there.
Okay, well, I might start this one, Andy, and defy you to disagree with me.
Okay.
This is from Lorenzo, who is a Juventus fan, and Lorenzo asks to play the start-bench-sell game, and this involves Serie A attackers. And the three names he's put on the table here are Lautaro Martinez, Christian Pulisic, and Kenan Yildiz. Look, I know what you're going to say, and I agree with you. Lautaro Martinez is one of the foremost strikers in the world. He doesn't perhaps have the sort of mad numbers of a Kane or a Kylian Mbappe or Erling Haaland, and perhaps he's not sometimes the most glamorous footballer, but he's a very efficient finisher, and I think that goes a long, long way with me. So I would, Lorenzo, I'm starting Lautaro Martinez. I think I'm definitely keeping on the bench Kenan Yildiz, because talent is he's such a talented player, and I think his ceiling is very high, and we don't know what he's going to be even now. And with all due respect to a fine footballer, I'm selling poor old Christian Pulisic. And that, Andy, is the one and only and correct and true answer.
I think that's fair to say. I would agree with that. I would love even more Lautaro with decent rests and holidays. That would make him
he is worn out, isn't he? Yeah,
from an excellent striker to an absolute world elite. And if you look at the Champions League numbers last season, he was that anyway. I think you can say some of the inconsistency, I think, can be put down to the amount he's flogged for club and country. The only caveat I would put to your answer: ask me this question again in 3 years' time, and Kenan Yildiz might be the starter. Because sure. I guess the question is, does Yildiz arrive at the point where he starts to score goals in real volume as well? Because we know he can score goals, but at the moment his value is as we talked about that lineage from Del Piero to him at Juventus, and he's such a useful creator. He's a brilliant creator, as we saw again yesterday against Lecce. So if he can add the goals to that creation, then you're talking about one of the very best forwards in the world.
Yeah, Lorenzo's a Juventus fan. I was wondering whether he's trying to tease a different answer out of us. But we're not playing future start bench sell. We're playing current start bench sell.
Look, if we were a Premier League recruitment team, this would be a different discussion, wouldn't it?
Sure. And we're probably living in a mad world where Yildiz is now worth more than Lautaro Martinez, because, as you keep saying, of course, children who can play the game are worth more than grown men who are good at it, This is from a PSG fan, Matt, who I think might be a bit worried about the way the season's unfolding. He says, Andy, with just 10 points separating first and sixth in Ligue 1, is this the most competitive we've seen that league in a long time?
It is, and long may it continue. Now, I think from that perspective, the results this weekend were a little bit of a letdown if you're talking about a title race to go the whole way, because, as we said, Marseille being dragged back towards the pack and Lille being dragged back towards the pack makes the race for Champions League more exciting, but it means we've got less likelihood of a real title race between a group of teams. And I think if you look at the squad of Marseille, they are the best equipped to take on PSG, and all of a sudden they're 7 points behind them, which is going to be very, very difficult to make up, especially if you assume that PSG are going to get better. So that leaves a lot of pressure, a hell of a lot of pressure on Lens. Of course, you know, they're playing with house money, but still.
Yeah. This is one that we kind of talked about last week, but I think it's worth doing again. Steve, the Brentford fan, says to both of us, who is our early pick to win the World Cup in America, Mexico and Canada? I've got to find an acronym for those three countries. Andy, I'm not going to ask you for a scientific analysis here because I think it's too open for that. It's also still enough months away that things can change. But if I had to ask you for an emotional response, who do you think is the favourite or favourites for the upcoming World Cup?
Spain. They seem the most accident-proof, I think. Not just the European champions, not just continuing to improve since then, unlike Italy, for example, when they won the European Championship in 2021, but the team that seemed most adaptable to injuries. So it feels to me that they're less a hostage to fortune than some of the other teams in it.
Yeah, I mean, I in order to give you a different answer, there's a part of me that really wants to say England because of their firepower, but I'm not sure that Thomas Tuchel has any intention of playing all the firepower in the same team. And I still think, as it has been for a decade, that England's fantastic progress through tournaments eventually founders on not having a centre-back pairing that I could trust absolutely with my life. I think France are the other real obvious ones, Andy, depending on several things. But they will leave behind, I was doing the calculation the other day, a squad. They will leave behind 16 or 17 players who would be a power in the World Cup themselves. They have the strength in depth to do it. Whether they have the tactical flexibility to deal with, you might run into a really good team in 100 degrees of heat. That is the danger of this World Cup. And then the game becomes slightly a lottery. But I think if you look at the players that France will be able to both put on the pitch and have on the bench, they would be... I'd take all your points about Spain. They've also got the experience, France, and they were very unlucky not to win it last time, let's be fair, weren't they? And so I think, given that Kylian Mbappe is still in his absolute prime, I'd go for France. One more before we take another break, and soon we'll be getting the start of the cricket in Sydney. It looks like a decent day's weather there. The rain and bad light of yesterday is over. We'll be getting John Norman, our cricket correspondent, tell us all about that. England going along nicely in their first innings. So I'll have one more question, and it comes from... let me get which one we'll ask. Okay, well, this is to do with our poll tonight. This is Leonardo, who's an AC Milan fan. I love that so many of you identify as fans of European football and listen to this show, which I flatter myself, because it's down to Andy, is the best show of its type anywhere on the radio, and I mean anywhere. He says, where would you like to see Enzo Maresca take his next managerial job? Because, Andy, despite leaving Chelsea, his value is really high. You know, he's won 2 trophies with Chelsea, including a global one.
It is. Look, I think he's not the finished article as a coach, but I think I would really like to see him develop players at Juventus, because that has been what they have not been great at over the last little while. And now they're leaning a bit more on the next-gen model. They're hoping to build the team around Kenan Yildiz when they extend his contract. You think there are all these other young players coming through. So to have that, and of course the inbuilt let's win now at Juventus, which is just part of them, I think that makes me feel that Maresca would be a really good fit for them. Now, of course, there's also part of me that would love to see him succeed Pep at Manchester City and see exactly how he could make a decent go of that in a very different context as well.
Yeah, as I say, his stock is very, very high. And as we've seen many times in the past, just being shown the door at Chelsea is no hindrance to going on to have an elite managerial career. Look at some of the people who've held that post over the years. It's almost beyond scientific measurement, Andy, that we've already done 2/3 of the show. I feel like we're just getting started. More to come, and including in the next hour, we'll be joined by Tony Afoki from the AFCON and Tim Vickery from South America. Don't go anywhere else. Stick with us here on Trans-Europe Express.
Let's be honest, we've all found ourselves raging at a referee's decision at some stage. This feel familiar?
That is an absolutely shocking decision.
They've got a case in that it was a bad decision.
It's such a poor decision.
Yeah, I think he's just made a bad decision in that instance.
But what does it take to get to the very top of football refereeing? Every referee starts with their county FA. It's a simple training course and you can take it as soon as you hit your 14th birthday. Once you've done that, you have to go through at least 11 hours of face-to-face training. You'll then graduate as a Level 7 official, which means you can take charge of county-level games. But hold your horses, there's still a long way to go to get to the Premier League. Your next step is to spend a year each at Levels 6, 5 and 4. This covers the top of the amateur game. Only at Level 3 do you start doing Northern Counties or Isthmian League level games, for example. If you've done this all quickly, you can reach Level 2 and ref your first National League match after, I don't know, 6 years? After getting enough experience at that level, you can apply to be a referee in the EFL. There's an interview, people watching you do games, and then, if the EFL are happy, you'll be granted a Level 1 licence to ref in games in League 2 and above. Now, they don't just say on you go to the Premier League, you have to work your way up through the divisions. Only after years of hard work and refereeing on cold Tuesday nights in Stoke can you be considered to do matches in some of Europe's very best stadiums. Now, who was the youngest to reach the very top? It was actually Michael Oliver. He refed his first Premier League match in 2010 at the tender age of just 25. So if you want to follow in his footsteps, crack on. It'll only take you roughly a decade, thousands of hours of work and an incredibly thick skin. In total, there are 37,000 registered referees across England, but the PGMOL has only deemed 21 good enough for the top flight. That means there's not even a 1 in 1,000 chance you'll even make it in. Obviously, referees can make mistakes, but when you think about it, having a go at them is kind of like slating a brain surgeon.
Welcome back to Trans-Europe Express, the final hour of tonight's edition of the show. I'm Danny Kelly. With me, as always and delightfully, is Andy Brassell. We've got a lot to get through. We'll be going all over the world in the course of the next 60 minutes, including to South America with Tim Vickery, to Morocco for the AFCON with Tony Afoki, and we'll have transfer tittle-tattle and much else besides. Welcome one, welcome all to the final hour of Trans-Europe Express. Now, those of you following such things into the middle of the night, including myself, will know that it's day 2 of the 5th and final test in the Ashes series down under Sydney, a beautiful place to watch cricket, but it's prone to rain and bad light, as we saw last night when we lost the last session of play. They've started a bit earlier this morning because of that lost time, to give you a preview of the day's play, in which I'm hoping for centuries from England's 2 best batsmen sometime in the next hour. Let's get over to our correspondent, John Norman.
Yeah, good evening to you, Danny. Lovely to hear as ever. And we are underway. And Joe Root has just moved 5 runs nearer to what would be his 2nd century of the series, with a guided steer down to 3rd. So he's moved to 77. And Harry Brook, who is 79 not out overnight and has yet to hit an Ashes century, is 79 and remains that way. Stark and Boland opening up for Australia at the start of day 2. Only 45 overs were possible yesterday, as you mentioned. And so we've got an additional half an hour up and underway. Second new ball is obviously 35 overs away. No spinner for Australia. And good batting conditions yesterday, expected to continue today. The biggest partnership of the series so far unbeaten, 161 for the 4th wicket. All of that after England were 57 for 3 at one stage yesterday. Now 218 for 3, with Root 23 away from 100 and Brook within 20.
Thank you very much indeed. If a wicket falls or England do get one of those 2 Yorkshiremen to become Centurions, John will be back. He'll also be back for regular updates throughout the night here on talkSPORT, as England seek, and I say this with a great deal of trepidation given what's happened in this series, seek to capitalise on the fine position they find themselves in as play restarts there in Sydney. Right, get the satellites up and running, because we go from Sydney now to Brazil, where we're joined by our South American correspondent, Tim Vickery. Happy New Year, Tim.
Happy New Year out there. 3 for 218. I'd like to see him try that routine on the hill at Sydney. Spiny Norman out there.
Listen, Tim, where do you want to start? You want to talk about Brazilian clubs. Their development has been, extraordinary in the past couple of years. You've kept us right up to date as money has flowed into Brazilian football, and their clubs have started to buy players from all over the rest of the continent, as well as bringing back some of the players who've made their living in Europe. Still on an upward trend, you think?
Yes, this is something that I wanted to cover last week. That was the year that was, and the line let us down. But I still think it's valid, because this is and it was a big year last year. We had a Club World Cup, and I can't emphasise to you how big the Club World Cup was over here. It was a bit like a World Cup where the national team plays 4 times in 3 days. It was extraordinarily intense. And in contrast to the Argentines, the 2 Argentine sides flamed out in the group phase, the 4 Brazilians all did well. They all made it out of the group. 3 of them, none of them were humiliated. 3 of them went home having beaten a European club. And you could argue that the phases of preparation were different. But then at the end of the year, when the calendar probably benefits the Europeans, in the final of the Intercontinental in Qatar, Flamengo took Paris Saint-Germain all the way to a penalty shootout. So we are seeing, and this is the first time for a while, I think, Brazilian clubs competitive. Now, foreign coaches have a lot to do with that. They've really improved the tactical level of the game. I do think, though, there are 2 little storm clouds on the horizon. One of them is that some of this is being fueled by betting money, and this market is still very much in its infancy. So at the moment, there are loads and loads of betting companies, all jostling for position, all throwing money around. I think as the market becomes more mature, some will stay, others will go, and there will be less advertising money, sponsorship money from this source. Another potential little problem, I think, certainly for some clubs, is Brazil is going to phase in some kind of financial fair play. Now, this could have a big effect because a number of the clubs have FIFA transfer bans and live beyond their means. When Corinthians, huge club, are in massive financial problems. They just won the Brazilian Cup. There is no way that they could assemble that squad with Memphis Depay if financial fair play regulations had been in effect at the time. They are coming in over the next few years. This is unlikely to affect the biggest Brazilian clubs, but it will affect some of the others. It will mean that the power of buying players, I think, will be a little bit reduced across the championship. So it's interesting times, I think, in the Brazilian league. Lots of positive factors, 1 or 2 little storm clouds on the horizon.
Tim, news this week that Neymar is extending his contract with Santos until December. Is this what is going to give him the best chance of getting to the World Cup squad, even if from the outside it seems like a bit of a long shot?
Emphatically, yes. I think it's the only way that he can get in the Brazil squad. And he's just had a minor knee operation. He will miss the start of the season. We kick off early this year. We kick off later this month. He probably won't be back until early February, around the time of his 34th. So he hasn't got long. Certainly hasn't got long to play his way back into the squad in time for those March friendlies against France and Croatia. But the calendar has come to his rescue, because usually the national championship doesn't start until the end of April, start of May. This year, the national championship starts at the end of January. So as soon as he's back, there are meaningful games there in which he can prove himself to Carlo Ancelotti. If he's able to do that, I don't know. Ancelotti has given himself plenty of breathing space here, and he's defined this one very cleverly. He said, I'm not taking anyone to the World Cup who's not fully fit. So he's used that as a possibility to head off Neymar at the pass if he doesn't want him. We really didn't see anything last year that would equip Neymar for tipping the balance in a World Cup. But he was never fit throughout the year. Is there anything of that player that there used to be? I don't know, but he's going to have to show it from when he comes back, maybe mid-February. He's got 3 or 4 months there. He's got probably a maximum of maybe 30 games to really prove that. So at the moment, I think it's still a possibility. Not a totally long shot, as it looked a few months ago, when it seemed that he did actually flirt with retirement. He was very, very down towards the end of last year. So I think a lot depends on his form, what he's capable of doing when he comes back in February.
Tim, if I might return to the story of the money pouring into Brazilian football and the effect it's had. As you know, I'm a huge fan of South American football, particularly historically. What's the effect going to be on the rest of South America? Will it be that Brazil will just soak up all the talent? Or Could it be that people with lots of money, betting companies, oil companies, all the rest of it, will realise there are some huge football clubs on that continent just ripe for taking over, selling their global TV rights and all the rest of it?
Well, at the moment, you can't do that in Argentina. The Argentine clubs are social membership clubs. They cannot be bought. That's a battle going on in Argentine society. It's difficult to overturn that because the Argentine clubs are so wedded into their communities as representatives of their communities.
Of course.
The idea of someone coming to buy them up and own them, it really doesn't go down very well. And outside Brazil and Argentina, the markets are so small, you just can't see where the return would be.
Tim, I have to stop you there because I hate to say these words, but there's a wicket in the cricket. John Norman.
Yeah, it's Harry Brook who's gone 226 for 4. Scott Boland has dismissed Brook. Sharply held catch at slip, actually. So he falls just shy of what would have been his first Ashes century. Essentially on the up, and he's trying to guide this ball through third. He scored a lot of runs square of the wicket behind the bat, and unfortunately for him, just a touch more bounce maybe. He couldn't get enough on it, and the chance has been taken at first slip. So that's a real shame for Brook. He's gone for 84, but alongside Joe Root, they've done their part. 57 for 3 when they came together. They put on 160 odd for the 4th wicket. So good stuff from Brook, but he'll be disappointed. And a big shout out to my old friend Tim Vickery. 11 years ago, he realised, as we both did at the same time, that we have a shared interest in small faces. And from that moment onwards, Itchycoo Park, every single time any presenter has crossed to me, he's called me Spiny Norman. And I don't think any presenter has ever really understood why, until today.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that. I always assumed that he was referring to Spiny Norman in the Monty Python sketch.
Yeah, I was really.
Okay.
But, the small faces are obviously there's somewhere in the mix. 4 for 226 out there.
Yeah, let me just say, for those who don't know the cricket, Harry Brook is the most brilliant England batsman since Kevin Peterson. He's also statistically the most successful in the early part of his Test career since Herbert Sutcliffe a century ago. I just wish he could bring even 1% of discipline to his game, because they'd never get him out. He's so good. Otherwise, but England, as you say, 226 for 4. I refuse to go Australian in the way I present the cricket. You were in mid-flow about the difficulty of pouring money into Argentinian football and stymieing my plans to buy Estudiantes, you know.
Yeah, although Estudiantes would be the one who would be open for business if it were allowed. This is the conflict going on between Juan Sebastian Verón, who is the president of Estudiantes, and the Argentine FA. There are countries where the clubs are businesses. You can buy them. Chile, Colombia. Which 2 countries have most underproduced over the last few years in terms of their club game? You got it. Chile and Colombia. It's the problem of football, especially in small markets. Where is the return coming from? Where are you going to make your money? All the Colombia wants to do, clubs want to do, is produce players and sell them as quickly as possible. Hence the fact that some of the big names in Colombian football, Hugo Rodallega, ladies and gentlemen, Dairo Moreno, who's maybe a couple of months younger, Teo Gutierrez, who's even older. You know, there are plenty of over 40s doing well in Colombian football. Colombia should be so much better. Biggest population outside Brazil in South America, lots of urban centres, but this business model, it doesn't seem to be working, and it's been an absolute disaster for Chile. Football is a very, very strange business. You're always coming against this question. If you're outside the major leagues that have hoovered up most of the global TV interest, where is your return going to come from?
Listen, thank you very, very much indeed. Tim Vickery there. As he and John were quite such pals, that's great to hear. More from Tim next week on South American football. We're moving very quickly from Australia, then to Brazil, next to Morocco, where we'll be joined by Tony Afoki to give us all the latest from the African Cup of Nations now that we're into the knockout stages of that great tournament. Yeah, there's NFL action later this morning where you can listen to the Baltimore Ravens at the Pittsburgh Steelers live on talkSPORT 2 after our show, just after 1 a.m. That's live NFL on talkSPORT 2 from just after 1 a.m. Now, we will be going to Tony Afoki very, very soon. But Andy, breaking news now from various sources. talkSPORT understands that Ruben Amorim's future at Manchester United is now in the balance following his explosive attack on the club's hierarchy. Amorim's fractured relationship with Director of Football Jason Wilcox is viewed by sources close to United as making his long-term position uncertain. Speaking after United's 1-1 draw at Leeds, Amorim strongly indicated he feels he should be given more power by claiming he wants to be United's manager as opposed to head coach, the title bestowed on him when he was appointed. talkSPORT further understands that Amorim's frustrations have boiled over after United top brass, including Wilcox, urged him to be more tactically flexible. For more on this story, stay tuned with talkSPORT as we will be providing updates as this story progresses. Andy, very briefly, because it's not our bailiwick to do Premier League football on here, but once I heard him actually name Wilcox, once he starts picking on people who are at least his equal at the club, you think, wow, somebody's got to go here. It'll be one or the other, won't it?
Yeah, and I think if we see the sum total of Amorim's work at Manchester United so far, the words have been more convincing than the actions. And I say that as someone who's a huge fan of his work at Sporting. But the reality is that Manchester United is a different level. The fact is that he's so aware of the power of his words, and he always was as a head coach at Sporting, is that those words have kept him afloat, a little bit like Jurgen Klopp's projection and words kept him afloat through a difficult first year and a bit at Liverpool. So he's not unaware of the power of what he's saying. And when you come out and say something like that, we've seen how quickly things can escalate with the Enzo Maresca situation.
Exactly.
I think this is going one way, isn't it?
Yep, I think you're absolutely right. And the truth is, like you, I'm a huge fan of what he did at Sporting. Indeed, I was touting him when Spurs were looking, as they always are, for a new manager. But the hard fact is he has not improved Manchester United's players individually or collectively. And, you know, maybe he would. Not enough, certainly not enough to justify throwing your weight around like that. I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying that's the reality of football clubs as institutions these days. As I say, keep an eye on that story. talkSPORT's website will be keeping it, looking out for any twitch on the vine over the next few hours. Meanwhile, the African Cup of Nations, I say it continues apace. Actually, we're into the tough stuff now. We're into the knockouts, which I really like very much indeed. Joining us from Morocco, as he has done throughout the tournament, delighted to say once again, to say hello and Happy New Year to Tony Afoki. Hi, Tony.
Hi, guys. Happy New Year.
Thank you very much indeed. Morocco are the hosts. Morocco have invested millions, not to say billions, in soccer. Morocco are expected to win. They just scraped past Tanzania.
Yeah, they did. I was at the game in Rabat today, and they just scraped past Tanzania. Honestly, the first 10 minutes was the best I've ever seen a team play against Morocco. Tanzania had Morocco on the ropes, and they just couldn't even string some few passes together. But in the second half, a moment of brilliance from Brahim Diaz, who's been one of the best players I've seen at this tournament so far, got Morocco into the quarterfinals. But it kind of reminds me of Brazil back in 2014, where Morocco were just scraping past these games. I think other than the Zambia game, where they won 3-0 and quite comfortable, they drew against Mali, they scraped their first opening game. Like, they've not been that convincing for a host nation that we're expecting to win this tournament.
Tony, I'm going to hit you with two questions here because I really want to know your opinion on what I think is the toughest game for one of the favourites in the last 16 when Algeria play Democratic Republic of Congo. So just bank that one for a minute and let's go back to Brahim Diaz because he has scored in every game so far. It feels very much like this could be his tournament. But much as he's valued at Real Madrid, he's not a main guy and he's never going to be a main guy. How difficult do you think it will be for Brahim to go back after being the star of a tournament to being a bit part player at Real Madrid, even if it is Real Madrid?
Yeah, this is the thing, honestly. The fact that he's been the main guy for Morocco in this tournament has been scary. We thought Achraf Hakimi, who was the reigning African Player of the Year, would be the main guy, but Hakimi's only just come back from injury. Brahim Diaz has been the one that's been really.
I think we should. I think the line is a little bit. It's very suspect there. I'm so sorry for Tony. But Andy, I think you could hear what he was saying there. Diaz, fantastic though he's been, he just has in the positions, and I say the plural deliberately, where he can play. There's just so much competition at Madrid.
Yeah, so much, and especially as Arda Güler has become a main guy for Xabi Alonso this season as well. To have a player who can keep it moving in midfield, which really they've not had. Real Madrid since Luka Modric exited. That they need that guy to make them flow. And other players like Eduardo Camavinga, Jude Bellingham, brilliant as they are, can't do that. Now, funnily enough, Brahim Diaz can do all of those jobs. He can be a right forward cutting in on his left foot. He can be that guy to keep it moving in the middle of the pitch, relayeur, as they would call it in France. And he could stand in for Jude Bellingham, as he has done in the past, to really great effect as well. But I just do wonder sometimes if he looks at himself, and if he will look at himself after this tournament and think, you know what, I'm someone who should have a team built around me. And I don't think it would be egotistical or unreasonable for him to think that.
No, absolutely right. Now, Andy, we've lost Tony, which is a real shame. We're trying to make sure we have a better line next week. But I know you'll know something about this story because you follow Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang very closely over the years, because he's always up to something. There's been he's been one of the central figures in the complete implosion of the Gabon team at this tournament. Yeah. Administrators, managers and players all scattered to the outer darkness.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've seen less of this since FIFA, at least ostensibly, made a vow to crack down on political interference in national team operations. But really, Gabon have tried to ban the coach, the players, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang in particular, for their showing at the African Cup of Nations. It's good old-fashioned.
This is the Gabonese government saying, no, you lot are useless, we're not going to play anymore.
It's good old-fashioned AFCON overreaction. And the interesting thing is this kind of started when Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, after they'd lost the first two games and we knew that Gabon were going home, the coach said, you know what, you're an old guy now, just go home, get some rest, and then play for Marseille. And this really was what I think set the blue touch paper ablaze, because I think it is all about appearances in international football. Now, I think you have to be realistic in the modern international game and say, look, especially with not just because of his age, but because of the pressure of club football. And Aubameyang has been used more for Marseille than perhaps even he would have expected at the start of the season. He's been more important for them than he would have expected, or anyone would have expected at the start of the season. Even though he's brilliant there the first time, he's older now, and there's got to be a point in the calendar where something's got to give, and he needs a bit of rest. And to make him play a futile game is exactly what causes the friction between international football and club football. And ultimately, if both are to survive in present form, they have to get better at understanding each other.
Listen, there are 4 more games in the round of 16 remaining. They are tomorrow and Tuesday. Egypt play Benin. And then on Tuesday, Algeria, as you said, take on the Democratic Republic of Congo. Ivory Coast take on Burkina Faso. But the game I'm interested in is tomorrow's game between Nigeria and Mozambique, Andy, because although the tournament is set up for Morocco to be champions, and I'm sure Tony, with his Nigerian antecedents, will be backing me up here, I I think the real threat to the locals will be coming from Nigeria, particularly their all-powerful forward line.
Yeah, it has to be. And really, it's like a deluxe version of the problem that Norway will present at next year's World Cup. The fact that you've got such a brilliant striker that on his day, he will dismantle anyone. Of course, he's not the only weapon Nigeria have got. The fact is, of course, they'll still be a bit sore about not making the World Cup. So this is an especially big deal to them as well. So I like you fancy.
They've got an array of things that could, on their day they should be able to beat anybody.
Yeah, they really should. And I think you look at them, for me still, the biggest threat to Morocco or Algeria. But Algeria, as I said before, when we had Tony on board, and I would have loved to hear what he had to say about it.
I know.
For me, it's the most difficult last 16 game for any of the contenders. Because we talked about it being Brahim Diaz's tournament. Maybe it could be Riyad Mahrez's tournament. He's been sensational so far. And, we've talked about it before, like players going off to the Middle East and maybe getting a little bit more respite and being able to prolong their careers a little bit more than they would have under the calendar pressure and under the physical pressure in European elite levels. I wonder if that's the case with Riyad Mahrez, because he looks absolutely fantastic. So if they can get past the Democratic Republic of Congo, and that for me is the game of the last 16, then they could be in business.
Thank you, Andy. Well, I warned you about England, the position they'd set up, didn't I? I warned myself, really. Another wicket in the cricket. John Norman.
Yeah, Stokes has gone. Good bit of bowling from Stark. Stokes on the defensive, actually, for much of his 10-ball innings. 11-ball, actually, including the wicket. He's gone for a duck, and Australia have been bang on it this morning. They just seemed a little bit lacking in intensity yesterday, but not so this morning. That early wicket of Brook, a man that they really fear, has just brought them back into this contest. Stokes could have gone first ball, airy drive, and seemed to shut up shop for the next 9 deliveries. He's tried to ride the bounce here as Mitchell Starc bowling round the wicket, and he's essentially got a thin outside edge. The batter, Stokes, doesn't think he hit it. He's got a shake of the head. The umpire didn't think he'd hit it. Australia were absolutely convinced and a little nonplussed. It wasn't given out on field. Either way, an absolute seed from Mitchell Starc, who arguably has been the man of the series, and that means England now 5 down. 229 for 5, and Stokes goes for an 11-ball duck.
Thank you, John. We'll keep you up to date as England recover from these 2 early wickets this morning and go on to make 550 for 7 later in the day. We'll keep you across all that here on talkSPORT. We're up next. We've got a whole big pile of transfer tittle-tattle for you.
transfer window. Breaking news on talkSPORT with Intuit QuickBooks. Tackle your self-assessment with Intuit QuickBooks. Search QuickBooks to find out more.
Yeah, welcome back here to Trans Europe Express, where we're next, Andy, we're going to turn to what can only be described as kind of gossip at this stage about transfers, but people love this stuff, and an interesting one already coming from Fabrizio Romano, who is the high priest of this kind of thing, who's saying, Andy, crucial hours ahead for João Cancelo deal, 100% leaving Al Hilal. Inter told Al Hilal they only let De Vrij or Acerbi join them if Cancelo is joining Inter on loan. Cancelo still waiting for Barca, but club decision must be made soon. So fascinating, not just because of him going from Saudi Arabia back to European football, but some pretty important defenders being allowed to go to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess the interesting thing, Danny, is that Cancelo is hard to believe now, but in his 30s. And this is really going to be the bit that's going to shape the end of his career. So whatever's happening now should be seen as temporary. Of course, for tax reasons, he needs to complete those 2 years as a Saudi contracted player. Which he will do if he just goes on loan. So there's no repayment of tax regardless of where he might go next. As well, though, there's the fact that whoever takes him on is going to have to stick 6 months of really big wages. Now, clearly, his club are going to pay some of that. Al Hilal are going to pay some of that, as they're going to have to. He might have to make an effort as well. If we're looking at going to Serie A, even if a club outlay a lot of money, it's still going to be a bit of a cut for him, you would expect. Now, the two main clubs that are in the mix for him, Inter and Barcelona. Again, Barcelona will need a bit of financial help to make this happen. It's fair to say. And where they are at the moment with the injury to Ronald Araujo, clearly they need a bit of cover, and they would like, or certainly Jules Koundé would like to play at centre half a little bit more, so that would be helpful to them. You look at where Inter are at the moment. They've got Denzel Dumfries out for a little period of time, and with both of these transfers, it would be Cancelo going back to a club where he played before. And talking of going back, he's spoken a lot in recent months about the fact that he would be open to finishing his career at Benfica. So I don't think we can rule out him going to one of these clubs for the next 6 months. And then at the end of that, maybe even going back to Portugal. But for him as well, it's about trying to get in the World Cup squad.
Andy, we talked earlier on about Real Madrid finding a midfielder. And we talked about young Schmidt at Schmidt. He's not German; he's Dutch. Schmidt at AZ. But there's some rumours now that Real Madrid look to rival Chelsea, Liverpool, Manchester City, and Manchester United for Crystal Palace's England international midfielder Adam Wharton. The problem there, I would have thought, for Real Madrid would be how much Adam Wharton would potentially cost.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot, particularly
north of 100.
Yeah, well, look, whatever the money is, it's not the sort of deal that Real Madrid are disposed to doing in January. If you look at Real Madrid and Barcelona in January, historically, it's small little round the margins sort of deals, if they're going to do anything at all. And clearly, you're looking at someone who's not just a this window signing, but a future sort of legacy signing, really. And it would probably require Real Madrid shipping someone really big as well to make that happen. So I think if you're looking at signing Adam Wharton, if indeed that's even realistic for Real Madrid, you're looking at something like post Vinicius or post Mbappe or post Brahim. Again, if we're talking about moving around the margins, because he's a great player, but not a player who's going to go for 80 million plus. So that is all very, very difficult to execute during January and would be very out of character.
Much more typical, I think, is the idea of AC Milan moving for Nathan Ake from Manchester City. Though again, the transfer fee that Nathan might command may not be to the taste of Italian clubs who like to bring in older players, frankly, let's be honest, for nothing.
Well, yeah, I mean, loan is possible. But again, there would be wage subsidy involved, of course.
Nathan would want to be playing with the World Cup coming. He's one of those, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about that. And clearly, we touched on the difficulties of West Ham recently. It seems he's already rejected a move to there, which is understandable, I think, in the position that they find themselves in. But, there's really keen competition for places in those centre-back positions in Milan. So if you look at where Milan are, the fact that Fikayo Tomori looked like he was on the periphery of things last season, sort of partly revived under Sergio Conceição, and it's been really, really good this season. Then you look at, they've got Pavlovic, Connie De Winter, who's played pretty well in recent weeks. There's no guarantee that Ake is going to go there and walk straight into the team, even if he would back himself, and even if it's an exciting thing, being able to play for a title contender. I guess the other thing that might appeal to you if you're Nathan Ake is the fact that there's no European football for Milan in the second half of this season. That's not normally a selling point, but if you're looking to play and keep yourself fresh ahead of the World Cup, maybe that's the ticket.
And a couple of French footballers, so I'm looking at you here, who Spurs are being linked with. One I'm very familiar with, Magnus Akliouche, the Monaco forward. And the other, more of a mystery to me, that's the Udinese centre-back Oumar Solé. What can you tell me about him?
Well, I think if we look at Akliouche first,
yes.
He was expecting to leave last summer. PSG were the main contender, and they simply weren't prepared to spend 70 million euros on him. How far Spurs are prepared to go, and of course how low Monaco are prepared to go, I think is interesting. Monaco can't do anything in the transfer market this winter if they don't sell someone, and they don't sell someone for decent money. So for them, especially post Ben Seguir, especially due to the fact that they're going nowhere at the moment. I mean, they're in 9th position in the league, and they don't even look like getting European football at the moment, which puts a big question mark over the future of Sebastian Pocognoli. That means that I think they have to do something. Maybe that means taking a cut on what they previously wanted. I think it's another question of how he would fit in at Spurs, because they've got a lot of talented forward players and seemingly no idea under Thomas Frank of how that all clicks together at the moment. So if I was Akliouche, I want to know what's the plan? What's the plan for me above putting me at a big club and seeing if it works? I don't really want to know that as a player. I want to know exactly what my role is and exactly how it works. In terms of
asking Thomas Frank for the long-term plan at Spurs may not be your brightest move. I'll just say that.
Possibly, maybe ask someone a little bit higher up in hospitality after the game. But
more tomorrow morning on the View from the Lane.
I look forward to it. I'm subscribed. But Solé is someone who showed a lot of promise early on at Lyon, went through Salzburg, where he received some really good coaching, has done a good job. Udinese, left-footed centre-back, pretty strong. That would suggest to me that if they were going to go there, they're moving on Radu Dragusin. Clearly, they're doing that on a temporary basis in this window to try and get him fit, but maybe that would be a bit more permanent. Soleil's got a lot of quality. I would love to see him at a big club.
Yeah, and of course Dragusin is still very much liked by a lot of Italian clubs because he's already proven in that difficult league. We've got thousands more. We'll do some more of these actually when we come back. We'll be talking particularly about the players who might or might not be going in and out of Turkish clubs, where of course money appears to be, if not no object, certainly not the biggest object, including one of the most famous players in the world today. All that coming up in the last 15 minutes of Trans-Europe Express, where we're once again delighted you've been sticking with us for the last 2 3/4 hours. And I'll take this opportunity, in case I forget, at the end of the show, to wish all of you a happy and, more importantly, healthy New Year. just a short while to go here on this version of this edition of Trans Europe Express, the first of 2026. How lovely to say those words. And Andy, we'll turn our attention now to what normally when we go around the other leagues, there's not been much football played in some of these other big leagues, but the stories keep on coming. So let's start with one of your favourite ports of call, Portugal, where the league title is supposed to be a very close 3-horse race each year. Slight danger of one of the nags getting away here.
Yeah, there really is. I mean, when we last talked about it, we were talking about the 10-point gap that had developed from Jose Mourinho's Benfica to Porto at the top. Benfica still unbeaten this weekend after beating Estoril 3-1 with Vangelis Pavlidis again weighing in, and again a great goal scorer for them. But they remain 10 points behind because Porto won 1-0 at Santa Clara today, which we'll come back to in a second. The big result of the weekend was really Sporting being pegged back late on at Gil Vicente. Of course, just lost their top scorer Pablo to West Ham. And do you know what? If they'd have had Pablo for this, maybe they would have beaten Sporting because they missed some chances. I think people will look at the tail of the tape and say, okay, when Gonzalo Inacio got sent off for a professional foul late on, that's what caused Sporting to fold. They were wobbling before and after, to be honest. So when they lost the lead late on to an equaliser, not a massive surprise given the flow of the game. But that, with today's result, leaves them 7 points behind Porto. And Porto, with that victory in the Azores, which wasn't pretty by any stretch of the imagination, they have had the best start of any team in Portuguese league history in the first half of the season in an 18-team league. They've dropped in 17 games, they've dropped 2 points. 16 wins and a draw, and that draw was against bus parking Mourinho Benfica. So it's an amazing effort. And I guess really we saw the practicality of Francesco Farioli's football, a very under par Ajax last season where he took them to the brink of the title. We're kind of seeing that all over again. I think you look at Farioli's image and it's all very new school holistic coach. But then you look at the actual football and it's quite old school Italian, actually. I think he owes more, if we're talking about the context of Italian football, to Elenio Herrera than he does to Pep Guardiola. And Diego Costa, the goalkeeper and captain, talked about it afterwards, and he said, I'm so pleased with this performance, not because it was brilliant, but it just shows how tough we were. And of course, there have been questions about Porto in the week. There was that video doing the rounds on social media of Diego Costa doing a little kung fu kick on Rodrigo Mora, their young teenage star in training, which he's insisted was a bit of jocularity, and some people have tried to make out that it's a sort of split in the camp. But if there is, it wasn't apparent in this game today, because they were gifted a goal really by Gabriel Batista, the goalkeeper of Santa Clara, who was trying to roll the ball out. It kind of slipped out of his hands for Samu to tap it in. But nevertheless, whatever the circumstances, amazing fortitude to this team, who were really pushovers in the last couple of seasons.
And the League Cup semi-finals, or last four, I should say, really, are coming up in Portugal. You've revealed to me this is a format I've not previously been aware of.
Yeah, so we look at the Super Cups and how they've been expanded. And look, I'm not pretending they've all been modelled on the Taça da Liga in Portugal, but it's the same format. So this idea that you have your four teams and they have a Final Four format where they all go to the same venue, they play two semi-finals, and then the two winners play a final afterwards. And it's made for a pretty good spectacle in the last couple of years, actually. Always in early to mid-January. The only real surprise, and in terms of the Portuguese Federation and the Liga, probably quite an unpleasant surprise, that Guimarães managed to knock off Porto, which, especially in the context of this season, really unlikely. So the first semi-final is between Sporting and Guimarães, not Sporting and Porto. And the second one's between Benfica and Braga. You know, the league would like it to be the big four. I know we talk about the big three, but Braga have kind of almost joined that as a four in the last couple of seasons. But yeah, it'll be really interesting. And of course, the chance for Mourinho to lay the ghost of Tottenham, where he wasn't given the chance to contest the League Cup final.
Yeah, let's move on to Turkey then, to Kaya, as I must learn to call it, Andy. Two things to note about the Turkish entry into the transfer window. This year, perhaps for the first time that I can remember, it ends at the same time as the rest of mainland Europe.
Yes, a big deal.
I think that's a big change. And as far as I can see as well, Turkish clubs continue to pretend that money is no object.
Well, you know what? If I was signing Mauro Icardi to a contract extension that was going to save me over 50% on the last contract I signed with him, I would not just be thinking about how to spend the money already. I would have spent it already. And
on Lego.
Yeah, possibly. But they're not spending it on Lego. That's the catch. They're going to spend it on further football players, even though they have plenty. But it's not just Galatasaray that are going to be busy. Now, some of the names that have been linked with Turkish Super League clubs in the Turkish papers in recent years, you know about Davide Fratesi, of course, who's not really getting in the team at Inter and would be a catch for Galatasaray. You've heard about Ademola Lookman being linked with a move to Fenerbahce. In the last couple of days, we've had Mo Salah linked with Galatasaray. After that, they've thought, it might be tricky to get Antoine Griezmann. Maybe we could go for Mo Salah, which is fascinating, isn't it? I mean, look, if any one of these star names landed, it would be amazing. I think to have Salah arrive obviously would be something else entirely. And we are talking about, just to make this clear, the possibility, however faint, of a squad with Victor Osimhen when he returns from the African Cup of Nations, Mauro Icardi, who will be playing in the Turkish Supercoppa semi-final tomorrow in Gaziantep against Trabzonspor. The other two teams involved in that, the other semi-final is Fenerbahce and Samsunspor, by the way, who did brilliantly to finish third under Thomas Reis last season. And now Mo Salah. That would be one hell of a front three. I mean, look, Okan Buruk knows what he's doing. Those three would not be starting at any game unless it was against the bottom team.
We might have to replace Mbappe Watch with Gala Watch, because that would be astonishing, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, it would, Danny. It would be called the Cardi Watch. Just to let you know,
of course.
I don't put my foot down often on this show, but sometimes.
And you've also copyrighted the name, so it's all happening for you.
Exactly.
Listen, we might come
I've got
back
the T-shirts printed.
We might come back to this in a second, Andy, but I want to get back to Sydney, where England's first innings continues against Australia in the fifth and final Ashes test. Let's get an update after a sticky start for England. Here's John Norman.
Yeah, it's been Australia's morning. They've been all over England, with Scott Boland and Mitchell Starc bowling throughout the first hour of play. 2 wickets falling. Harry Brook caught first slip by Steve Smith, who's brilliant there, with Alex Carey standing up behind the stumps. Brook went for 84, and that really has signalled the go slow for England, who have got stuck. Ben Stokes lasted just 11 deliveries before he was caught behind for a duck. Mitchell Starc nipping out the English skipper again. And Joe Root, who started the day, 28 away from century, still 11 adrift. And Jamie Smith's new to the crease is 7 not out. So Australia fighting back at the start of day 2 of the 5th test match. They bowled brilliantly in this series so far, and that has continued today, with England now 2-4-2 for 5.
Yes, also one of those tests where there's large chunks of the crowd wearing light-coloured suits and silver wigs. They're all being Richie Benaud, the great and long-lamented doyen of Australian, indeed world cricket commentators. Andy, we've got a few seconds left. Thank you for all your work this evening. I didn't get a chance to ask you about the new year and what's your hope. I mean, obviously all my hopes are for you and your family to be well and happy and healthy. What's your hopes for football, Andy, in an important World Cup year?
Affordable prices for the people who want to go. And not just the day before via dynamic pricing. I think the token efforts that have existed so far to do a bit of good PR and bring down some of the prices are not good enough. So I hope more people who've really given support and given life to the game and brought fan culture alive in the US and given their opportunity to go and see games at the World Cup. That would mean a lot to me.
Listen, that's well, I could only echo that. Thank you so much indeed. We'll be back next week, as always. Next here on talkSPORT, it's How to Win the World Cup. I'll be back on H&J tomorrow at 1:15 in the afternoon. Andy will be on soon after me. In our poll, you cannot split where Maresca will go next. Juventus, Manchester City in the Saudi Pro League, all virtually neck and neck. Stick with talkSPORT, but thanks for listening to Trans Europe Express. God bless you all, and good night.